The negotiations over the summer.
Yeah, over at Wisconsin. So University of Wisconsin-Madison. It's online. And it's almost the same class. I just take a few case studies out. It's shorter. It's like 8 weeks instead of 10.
The MEM program offered in Duke similar to this one.
No, no, actually very different. I think they've got a lot of law classes,
Okay.
right? I think they do more with communications. They tailor it more for fresh outs. And this is not a fresh out program here. It's almost all fresh outs. So very little experience in the classroom, and they do some very basic things that I think our students wouldn't really appreciate that much. So I don't know.
That was my second option, but I never finished the application for this.
Well, I think Duke might be like lower cost of living in the area.
I had family in Raleigh.
Oh, you did? Okay. You could have lived with them. Okay. But you came here anyways.
Yeah, I was already living in Northwestern. I really.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of folks from India go to Duke, or at least they used to. Well, Purdue's pretty popular too, right?
It provides for job hunting is 100 times better than honestly speaking. Everybody who goes to Purdue says this. I think Purdue is one of the only colleges in US where people go and tell me that, yeah, the job hunt was easy.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Which was surprising, especially even during these times. But yeah, because I don't know how they do it. Apparently they practically force students to sit and apply, and they like get in people from many. They get in recruiters more than they get in industry leaders.
Okay.
So with recruiters, when you start networking with recruiters, you get noticed with them. That's the idea.
Right. So the whole program sounds like more like a job hunt type
Pretty
program.
much.
Yeah.
Popular,
Well, yeah, I guess, that's what universities have become, is more like a job placement center. So I'm having
Do you ever think about changing half of the seminar towards that?
towards what? Job hunt?
Yeah.
Um,
The first half of the seminar would be as we did, and then the second half, not necessarily.
you mean having people fill out applications in the class?
Filling out job applications, but
workshop.
or yeah, like the
Kind of.
guidance.
But ECD does all that stuff. No?
They do give you some funding, but not as much help as one would expect for college.
Okay. One thing I've noticed is it's not so much the resume, it's kind of like the mentality of not building on what you've done. So people come and I look at their old resumes and I say, you say you want to do this, but your resume screams that, right? And so I just look at a resume and I say, hey, this is inconsistent with what you're telling me, right? Your words and what's on the resume are two different worlds, right? Is that a valuable thing? I don't know. Nobody seems to come to my office to ask for that help. So very few. I had maybe a half a dozen, but compared to the amount of students in the program, very few come to me to say, hey, help me scrub my resume, right? And scrubbing the resume isn't really the issue. I'm not sure people are getting hired by resumes anymore. So what's the point?
Resumes don't get you anywhere. There's always going to be one person who has a better resume than you are applying for.
Right.
Maybe that's fine.
Always. You have to just pick up the phone, call people. At Mac, they'll ask you to cut the call, right?
Right.
And that person doesn't even know you. It's okay.
Yeah.
Just call people. That's what I did. I realized in the first 4 months only that resume work is not gonna work out for me.
Well, you're competing with 100,000 other resumes.
Probably, serious level human beings who you don't want to compete with.
Well, they may or may not,
More fitting resume for that role, for the one that you're applying for.
and everyone's using AI to adapt their resumes to the job anyways.
Nice Claude Code agent running that
Mhm.
makes resume, not just for the job description, that was a PDF that I can directly.
Actually,
It's awesome, I love it.
It's LinkedIn optimization has been automated. You put in your latest resume, LinkedIn gets optimized. Your job application, Claude applies for over 200 jobs daily for you without even touching your laptop.
and how's that working for everybody?
I took like,
Well, you're using it,
I took 2 to 3 weeks to get the agent running properly.
and how's that working?
It doesn't auto apply, it just auto generates resumes.
Okay.
It gives me, I put in the job description, it gives me a score from 0 to 5. Anything above a 3.5 is worth my time applying. So it automatically outputs the resume for them.
Huh?
Then I just apply. But that's allowed me to do, instead of 10 applications, I can do 80 tailored applications.
I'm told that you can do 1,000 applications in this market. Doesn't seem to help too much.
You're gonna realize who's applying for the job.
Right.
And whether it's in design or I'm actually sitting and doing it, or whether the resume is actually, what you're saying it to be. I simply think, initially it will work out, but eventually it will. It'll
I mean,
become an issue.
I was a little bit in proper guardrails, so it doesn't
Mhm.
invent anything, and after that, it's been good. I haven't got any hits, but. Yeah. Honestly though, Professor, I have a good lead on a job,
Great.
and, the program, my understanding of how businesses run and everything from a year ago to today is 10 times more, like it prepared me for the role that I might be getting.
So what prepared you? This program?
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah,
Yes, for sure.
yeah.
Well, I'm told that even courses like project management are giving people the lingo and the understanding of just even things like scope management. Scope creep. How do you manage scope creep? We spent a lot of time on that, right? And it's turning out that that's the stuff people want to talk about.
But yeah, it's very, the best part about this course is it allows you to move into supply chain, it allows you to go into products, project, sales. And I think, it lets you choose where you wanna go.
Yeah, this program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't really get into the medical device industry after my undergrad.
So back to Purdue, right? So Purdue is in the middle of Indiana. It's one of the few engineering schools in that part of the country. There's a lot of industry these days in Indiana that's screaming for help. But if you've been to Indiana, you know it's really just one big cornfield.
Yep.
Right, with the exception of being Indianapolis, which is a little bit more like Evanston with a thyroid condition, right? It's not like Chicago at all. It's just an extended version of Evanston, right? It's not a bad place. I mean, Indianapolis is wonderful. I mean, it's actually very affordable. But where else do you get engineers in Indiana? You gotta go to Purdue. And so they have a chokehold on companies like Subaru that have a big operation over there, right? A lot of car companies are located in Indiana. So we're locked up with Purdue and the state of Indiana and that whole kind of cabal of sorts that's probably how they get the job. So. Because you've got 3 or 4 engineering schools here in Chicago, all competing with each other. There's many of them bigger than Northwestern, right? IIT is exclusively engineering. UIC is a public university with probably twice the size of this engineering school. And there's a lot of companies in Chicago, but there's mostly finance and banking and medical. Not a whole lot of manufacturing in the traditional sense, right? Consulting is here,
right? But they wanna hire, largely, they seem to be historically wanted to hire MBAs.
Honestly, they're shifting now. They're shifting, consulting is mainly shifting into, computer science, but I don't, it was, that shift was there from 2015 to 2020.
They also want data science.
Yeah, data scientists, computer scientists, but I think that's gonna go out soon, considering how AI is just something more.
How are you?
Field, I guess.
Good. So, I'm not trying to make excuses for Chicago. I think Chicago is a great place to get a job, find one, but it's probably the more prevalent on the West Coast. The types of jobs you want here are more prevalent in San Francisco, right? But the turnover is also there, and the cost of living is extremely.
Boy, I was doing my maths and cost of living, and I was just like, I need more jobs.
Or share your apartment with someone.
That is gonna happen. You have no other choice.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think I'll be able to afford my rent,
Well,
so
how do you even get from point A to point B? If you've been out there, you know there's no public transit.
the first thing that when my PG manager told me, oh, it's, gonna be work from home for the first 6, 7 months at least. I
That's
said,
great.
yes.
Did you
And then
afford,
find a place close to a grocery store.
well, I mean, some of our students have gone to Austin, Texas.
Texas is a huge bet. Texas, Houston, Dallas, lot of companies over there, and many of them are headquartered over there because they get like good tax rates and everything.
And it's relatively low cost, I think,
But yeah, cheaper than West Coast, that's for sure.
but that's true for Chicago.
I think Chicago is more expensive.
Texas.
Yeah.
All right. But again, public transit is pretty terrible.
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah,
Yeah, drive everywhere in Texas.
yeah, you can't, I mean, unless.
Checking Houston rates of freeway. So they have these automated, toll collection.
Yeah.
And, one of my uncles lives there, and we were just traveling from and asking, okay, how much does each toll collect? Because from this place to the city, takes about, 14 to 15 toll collections. And he says I can spend close to $40 every day just on toll.
$40.
What?
So it's $200 a week
Yeah.
on toll. That's not a lot. With gasoline, it's probably about double.
Gasoline is cheaper.
Yeah.
Gasoline is very cheap, and that's how they make it up with toll. It's essentially the same thing. Gas is super expensive here. So the toll is super less. And,
And There's
like,
fewer tolls. I think for me, if I drive an hour, it's maybe 3 tolls.
but it's insane how expensive tolls are over there. Because as you get closer to the city, each toll starts charging you $2, $2.50. That's a little far away towards more suburban, further away from the city, that's like $0.5, $0.6, but that's still a lot of money.
All right, I gotta finish setting up.
The truth presentation, is it 5 minutes?
Yeah, sure, 5 minutes each, sure. Why? You got time, right?
Plan my
Your presentation,
timing.
okay.
Oh. Yeah, yeah.
Testing, testing. Okay. You know, folks, it's already 9:05. I'm going to get started because we got a lot to cover. This is going to be probably our busiest session of the entire quarter. We're trying to cover and debrief 2 case studies, which is why we won't have time to actually do the case studies. Have you guys done summer interns? So you've done summer interns, you've done the global pandemic, so we'll be able to debrief both. What else we got? We got 3 truths to go through, and we got all the team presentations for the final project. So we've got a lot to cover. Good morning. But as a foundational topic that we haven't talked about yet, I'd like to talk about coalitions because I think coalitions are kind of at the heart of global pandemic. It's also at the heart of any multi-party negotiation you might have. I'm not going to give you a bunch of PowerPoint slides on this, but I will give you my rendition, my view of what building coalitions is all about, right? So when you have a multi-party negotiation, what you're going to want is to recognize that some of the parties are going to start to coalesce and conspire with each other to work against others in the multi-party negotiation. Why would they do that? What's the advantage of a coalition? Gives you bargaining power, exactly. It gives you options that you may otherwise not have. It gives you more authority at the table, gives you more budget, more resources, but also when you walk away, more impact, right? Because you're going to be walking away with your coalition. So this is why treaties, and this is why we have NATO, this is why we have a whole lot of things that basically become preformed coalitions for future negotiations and future conflict resolution. The three fundamental things that I'd like to think about with coalitions. First of all, it shifts the power. If it weren't for coalitions, the most powerful party, in many cases, the United States, sitting at the table, if it weren't for a coalition, the United States would always have the power advantage, right? They would always have the leverage that other organizations, other countries would lack, okay? Which is why, if you look at geopolitics right now, why BRICS is so interesting, because it's a coalition of mostly southern countries that represent large populations, but not necessarily large GDPs individually, but collectively, you're getting a much bigger portion of the world's GDP through BRICS, B-R-I-C-S, right? Than you would have had, let's say, between the US and Argentina, the US and pick any country in South America or in the Middle East or in Southeast Asia. So the Philippines, right? I believe they're part of BRICS, right? Countries like the Philippines have very little influence on the world stage, but when they're part of BRICS, they have much more influence, right? So it shifts the power dynamics. It can shape the outcome of any negotiation because the coalition helps you establish what the coalition's priorities are, what the objectives are, and what their interests are. So you're pooling those interests and using that pooled interest to negotiate against others, right? It helps you amplify weak players, right? So a weak player might not have much power at the table, but as part of a coalition, they do, okay? And this kind of gets to, we talked about, the power dynamics with regard to prisoner's dilemma. So with prisoner's dilemma, if you have, and who did the prisoner's dilemma extra credit? So you probably know what I'm talking about, but it's just like you've got 2 parties, when they keep that coalition intact, they're much more powerful than when you separate them, right? A good detective who has basically captured, right, and arrested a coalition will immediately break them up into separate interrogation rooms, right? Because you can basically leverage one against the other. Welcome, Matthias. Can you hear us okay?
Again, yeah.
Good, welcome. We're talking about building coalitions as a topic. And frankly, I think it's a good lead into both global pandemic and any other multi-party negotiation you might have, right? So what else do we know about coalitions, right? They form naturally. whether you anticipate them or not. So it's important that you, as the other party, let's say you are the United States, you should be anticipating BRICS. You should be anticipating coalitions in the case of the Middle East, like who's aligning themselves with Iran, right? If you're going after Iran, recognize who are Iran's natural partners, natural allies, whether that's China, because China is a customer of Iran, Russia, because they sell arms to Iran, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So recognize where big players might be teaming up with your quote unquote smaller opponent. 90 million people in Iran don't sound that formidable until you realize, well, wait a minute. It's not just those 90 million people, right? So anticipate coalitions, recognize that they're complicated, right? There's informational complexity, procedural complexity, and social complexity, right? Which makes them somewhat unstable. So today's coalition might fall apart tomorrow, which frankly, if the US was smart, they'd be trying to break apart the coalitions that are forming against them, whether that's BRICS by undermining the parties in BRICS or undermining the parties aligning themselves with Iran. When you are part of a coalition, you've got two sets of negotiations, right? The ones that are internal to the coalition and then the ones that are external to the coalition, right? The internal negotiations are just as important as the external ones. Why? You might be a minority player inside the coalition and you still need to get your voice heard, right? Coalitions can be cooperative. They can also be competitive, right? Meaning that, we were in a coalition during World War II with Russia, right? Russia were part of the Allies. Well, guess what? Through most of that war, the US and Russia really didn't trust each other. So the sharing of information, the sharing of strategy, et cetera, wasn't always free flowing, right? And as soon as that war was over, that coalition broke apart, right? And the US and Russia turned on each other and said, okay, we're no longer allies, we are now competitors, right? And the whole tenor of the discussion changed. Blocking coalitions are as important as winning coalitions. And you could argue maybe some of what we're seeing in Iran and what we're doing in Iran is a way to block the coalitions that are forming like BRICS. And this is the US countermeasure to the formation of BRICS, right? So any questions or comments about coalitions? We'll talk about this, I guess, in a few moments when we do global pandemic. But in the meantime, I am thinking we should go and pivot straight to the truths. So Sujit, Venkat, Christian, who would like to go first? Christian, I know you were talking about it. Do you want to go first? You want to share your screen?
Yeah.
Zoom, yeah, it's a Zoom connection that's on Canvas. And by the way, this whole discussion on coalitions can actually apply very well to corporate America or corporate globe, right? I was involved in an initiative to create a standard on packet switch data, right? But everyone in that company working on packet switch data was outnumbered by the people working on circuit switch data, which was almost 10 to 1, right? So recognize that all the circuit switch people are going to coalesce around themselves. The packet switch people are going to coalesce around themselves. And I don't want to make it seem like it's a combative situation, but these coalitions do have their ways of influencing decisions in corporate America. Who gets funding, who gets resources, who gets priority, who's going to get the factory, who's going to get the best people, et cetera, et cetera. So with that, Christian, you want to take it away? Okay. Yep. Is that okay? Yeah. You got truths 45 and 46.
I'll be presenting the last two truths of the book. So Truth 45 is satisficing versus optimizing, and Truth 46 is the enlightened mindset. All right, so what does Truth 45 tell us? Truth 45 is the trap. It tells us that most of the time during negotiations, we settle for good enough. We believe that the pie is fixed and we don't try to expand the pie. Therefore, we are satisfied with the outcome, but we never attempt to optimize it. On the other hand, Truth 46 offers the solution to that with a mindset. It's called the enlightened negotiator. This truth tells us that there is always a way to expand the pie, and it doesn't matter whether you love or are against your counterpart, expanding the pie will always benefit both of you. So what is satisfying? Satisfying is exerting just enough effort to reach a barely acceptable result. Settling for good enough instead of optimizing for the best possible scenario. So the main things about Truth 45 is that you satisfy with the outcome, as I mentioned before. There's a lack of feedback. Most of the time, you walk away from a negotiation not knowing if you left something on the table. We've seen this happen with one of our first negotiations,
Biofarm?
Biofarm.
Yep.
That in that case we did learn, but sometimes this doesn't happen. And again, as I mentioned before, the fixed pie bias. There's always a way to expand the pie, even if you believe there is not a way. You can usually find one way or another to do it. And I feel like we learned that as we progressed through the class, especially through these last negotiations. Global pandemic was very interesting, expanding the pie and finding ways to adjust to the different budgets of especially the Gavi coalition we were talking about. So a personal experience with this during salary negotiations at my last job, I left a lot of value on the table because I was negotiating with a recruiter on a imagine like it was Thursday, Friday, and the limit of signing the contract was Monday. And for some reason, the recruiter that I was working with was off that Monday. And I had just gotten a certification that would have pushed my salary up. But I was scared that if I went past that date, that offer was no longer going to be valid. So in that case, I just decided to sign the contract and stay with that salary instead of trying to optimize and essentially expand the pie. So be aware of that whenever you're negotiating, that there's always that possibility. Always try to optimize. Even if it's not expanding the pie, don't leave so much value on the table as you need to know your BATNA, you need to know your counterpart's BATNA, and from there find a middle ground. And as we learned the ZOPA.
So to relive your experience, what would you do differently had you like applied the concepts from this class to the negotiation you just discussed?
I feel like I never considered their BATNA.
Right.
I feel like I was a valuable employee to them,
Right.
and that they would not have just, okay, the offer is done and we're not going to hire you anymore.
Right.
I believe that they would have negotiated with me.
Could you have asked for an extension of the deadline?
Exactly.
Right.
But I was scared since the recruiter was off that Monday.
Right.
The deadline was that Monday, and
Well, all the more reason to ask for an extension. Now you have an excuse for an extension.
right, but I was worried about my visa as well.
Okay. Can't negotiate that, right?
Yeah, and so I had my ban as well, that if I walked away from the negotiation, I essentially had 60 days to find a new job
Okay.
or leave the country. So I
Right.
was like, no, I'd rather take a pay cut, know that I'm gonna, and then hopefully get back to that salary negotiation further
Sure.
down the line. So now let's move to Truth 46, the enlightened negotiator. Expanding the pie is always the right move, no matter how you feel about your counterpart. If it's someone you love, expanding the pie, it's a win-win for both of you. That creates a benefit for both. And if it's someone you distrust, even if you may believe that expanding the pie will give them more, it's also giving you more. So this again generates that win-to-win scenario. The book, I don't have a personal story for this, but the book tells this very interesting story about this pharma company that was having a negotiation class event convention, and this was for employees of the pharmaceutical company. The pharmaceutical company decided to also invite all of their clients to this convention. One of the people that worked at the pharma company was questioning, why are you inviting clients? You're giving away all our secrets to them. But the higher ups at the pharma company told them, well, we want to teach the people we're dealing with how to negotiate. Because if you deal with someone that knows how to negotiate, by both parties being enlightened, you create a much better negotiation. You allow both parties to expand the pie and essentially reach a better agreement. I feel like this has also happened throughout the class. As we got further into it, negotiations got a lot easier as we all analyzed it from a similar perspective. Analyzed each other's BATNA, whether trying to find the ZOPA.
Because you're all trained the same way,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
But that's not true in the real world.
No, but that was the idea of this company.
Okay,
Let's bring in our clients as well,
yeah.
so that everyone is on the same page. on
And
how to-
suppliers, would they bring in suppliers too?
Yeah, yeah, that was the main issue, like the person that worked on the pharma company was like.
Yeah.
Why are we bringing all these people in and telling them how we negotiate if that's our leverage? They're like, no, we'll increase our leverage if everybody knows how to negotiate.
Right.
So that's what Truth 46 is about, like
Well, it's the difference between a win-win and a win-lose mentality, right?
pretty much.
Yeah, because if you go after a win-lose, you're going to say, I want to monopolize everything from the process of negotiating to the information behind it, to, the purchasing power, all that stuff I want to centralize here and not share it with my counterparty. In which case, they're going to do the same, and you're going to wind up with a diminished result, right?
Yep. And as the professor was mentioning, one of the things that I liked the most was this quote right here. The hardest person to deal with isn't the expert. It's actually someone that isn't trained properly negotiating. The unprepared person will not even have a vision of how to expand the pie. They will worry about their position more than interest.
Okay.
And the negotiation will be locked in a stalemate. essentially.
Right.
How do the two truths connect? So basically, Truth 45 shows us the trap of satisficing and how we leave a lot of money on the table. But Truth 46 shows us a solution out of it by having the proper mindset and being a more enlightened negotiator. You're able to expand the pie and essentially extract as much from the deal as possible. So, what are the 3 things that I'm changing in my personal negotiations after this class is that I will always probe first, like in the salary negotiation, I will attempt an extension, for example, or find other ways to keep the negotiation going, as I knew that I deserved more in that case.
Mhm.
Always welcome experts into negotiation. It is a lot better to negotiate with someone that knows how to than someone that has a fixed mindset and will not add the same value as you will to that negotiation. And to close the loop, feedback from negotiations is really good. I feel like talking with people on how you negotiate and what you did right and wrong will build you to be better the next time you walk into a negotiation. So yeah, just a few thoughts to leave you guys with for the future.
All right. Thank you. Nice job. Any comments or questions? I'm glad that you went the extra step to connect the 2 truths, to actually kind of bring this down to reality. Thoughts, questions? Yeah.
So, you got the job, ever tried to speak to your manager after you got the job, saying that they have the certification to leave?
I did, yes. After I signed the deal, because I already made the recruiter aware that I had that certification and that I wanted a higher salary. So when I talked, they were like, "You're hired now. You got to deal with the manager." So then, when speaking with the manager, they were like, "Yeah, get 1 more certification and we'll bump your salary." So I did, and then
It didn't happen? You never got this bump?
I got a 50 cent on the hour salary increase, which
Wow.
I felt was a bit insulting, given that I knew that some other people that were at my same level were making $3-4 an hour more than I was.
with the same certificate,
with the same certificate, yeah.
right? Wow.
So,
And what did your boss say about that? Tough? Life is rough, you learn to live with it?
yes, I couldn't discuss it too much with them because this was a time when, Waymo was outsourcing all their quality assurance
Okay,
sector,
okay,
and I was working under Cognizant. and
okay.
Cognizant was moving everything to India. So
Power was shifting, right?
power was shifting completely.
Yeah.
We started with a team of 40 people.
Yeah,
By the end, we were 15.
yeah, and you were part of the
And I was part
15,
of the 15. So I was like,
and you wanted to stay there.
I wanted to say that if I negotiated harder, I knew that I might be let go. And
Sure,
I knew I was making at least enough to be okay.
yeah.
So
But this is a microcosm of what's happening in industry today, right? We talked about jobs and the job opportunities, but if a lot of outsourcing is happening,
Yeah.
right, and remote design centers and what they call, I guess, GCCs, global, capability centers. So these are attracting a lot of the jobs and they're being diminished here. In other words, the layoffs are happening here because the jobs are going elsewhere, right?
it's a lot cheaper.
It's a lot cheaper, but it's also, they got a bigger pool
Yeah.
of resources to choose from. They have fewer regulations in many cases. And they also, there's tax incentives as well to go overseas. If you're in a SEZ or special economic zone, right? You can save a lot on your taxes as well. So there's a lot of incentives for what we're seeing today, but it's by shifting the power, it diminishes your power. You have less options and less ability to push back, right? So keep that in mind and think about how you can obtain something that nobody else has, some unique differentiator, right? So that you can maintain some degree of power, but the bigger picture is tough in a place like this, right? Where you've got, a shifting power base, right?
Yeah, yeah. Especially being international, I feel like the best thing you can do is make yourself invaluable for the company.
Exactly. Find something that they can't do without, that only you can provide, right?
Yeah.
Other thoughts? So on the job, right, there's a lot of things that you can try to understand what is common and commonplace in industry. Relocation expenses are typically reimbursed, right? Loss of any kind of financial advantage you might have at your company. Let's say if I'm transferring from company A to company B, if I'm going to lose a benefit, if I'm going to lose stock options, if I'm going to lose salary, bonuses, if there's a bonus that's sitting out there, right? And that let's say you missed it by a month because you started a new job. The new job should say, wait a minute here, we're going to give you a prorated amount for that bonus because you had to give it up. So use this in your negotiations. Did this happen to you?
No, I had a bad experience with bonuses as well.
You had-
I did not have a good experience with Cognizant working with them.
Did you negotiate with them?
I
Not
did.
much?
It didn't end up well. I would have negotiated differently. Basically, every year you had like a year in review meeting
Yeah,
where you had to fill out a report of everything that you did, what certifications you gained and all that.
okay.
And I filled that out, but I uploaded certain images of the certifications in like, instead of a JPG file, like a PNG. And because of that, they took away like $500 from the bonus
Because of a format issue?
because of format issue, because they said that the HR people couldn't access that image.
Wow, okay.
Checking for the better file.
Nope,
So you had no chance to fix it?
I had a chance to fix it. I found out like after the meeting when my manager was like, yeah, this is your bonus for this year. Like, why don't I have the same one as last year if I did equal or more? They're like, yeah, we can see your images.
Wow,
They were uploaded in the incorrect format.
right, wow, okay. All right, well, thank you, Christian. Nice job, well done. Okay, so who'd like to go next? Either Sujit or Venkat? Okay. You're online with Zoom? Okay. All right, we got it. I think we need to update Truth 39 to say negotiating with AI. Has anyone negotiated with AI outside of this classroom? No? Job interviews? What's the context? Okay, got it. Okay. And you're negotiating with AI in that case. Okay. Hmm. Okay. So you work with DRRC? So where's DRRC taking the AI thing in terms of negotiations? Are they going to have negotiations that are involving AI, that are engaged with AI? Okay. In a similar fashion to what we've been doing here. Different.
I mean, here we have to upload a PDF and then we have to negotiate with AI.
Yeah.
But they only have a system for that where there will be like all the descriptions and everything, then you do.
Got it. Okay. Okay. I think in the real world, what's happening is that, for example, I go to my bank and a bot answers the phone and I want to renew my CD and I say, get me the best rate. And they say, well, here's the best rate. And then I go back and forth. So it's like, oh, I want a longer term. I want a higher interest rate or whatever. And it becomes one of those, right? So,
Because the humans prompting for everything
right.
and it's pre-prompted. So there are multiple rounds of testing, there are multiple rounds of prompting. So it's all together.
Cool. Okay. All right, Suja, take it away. It's working, I think, right?
So good morning, everyone. Today I'm presenting truths 39 and 40. So both these truths are connected. So truth 39 is about what changes in negotiations happen through email or the internet, and truth 40 is about how the relations change based on the how the relation-based negotiation turns into an online bidding. The main theme is that technology not just makes the negotiation faster, it changes the behavior, trust, risk, and strategy. So 239 says that email and internet negotiation removes a major information feed, the human cues we get in person. In face-to-face negotiations, we notice tone differences, facial expressions, body language, and real-time reactions. Online, much of that disappears, and that creates blind spots that can make misunderstandings easier. But there's an advantage. Email can reduce status effects because charisma, height, appearance, and physical presence matters less. For engineers, this can be helpful because if the argument is well written, well supported by facts and logically organized, the ideas carry more weight. So the first lesson is that email negotiation is not casual. It rewards preparation but hides important email. Truth 39 also warns about two major risks. First is a harsh tone problem. People often become more aggressive online than they would be face to face because normal politeness ritual is weaker. A direct message can sound hostile, and a small misunderstanding can become conflict. Second is the high roller problem. Virtual negotiations can make people more risk tolerant. Because the other person and the consequences feel farther away, people may commit too quickly and continue when new facts suggest that they should slow down. The fixes are practical. Negotiation email should not be sent in anger. Face time early in progress and helps build trust before negotiation becomes difficult. A little rapport before the terms can make the conversation smoother. Finally, matching the other side's language early signals that their frame is understood. The simple takeaway is relation first, transaction second. For 239, I want to start with this question. Have you ever seen an email, text, or negotiation? Have you ever seen an email or text make a negotiation worse? I'm thinking about situation where tone was misunderstood or where people became more direct than they would have been in person. Another way to think about this is which negotiations should happen only by email. For engineers, this also raises a useful question. Is email an advantage because because it rewards facts and preparation, or disadvantage because it removes human connection? Truth 40 is about structural change. A negotiation may begin as a relationship, but then a buyer can move the process to an online competitive bidding platform. The example is a small specialized supplier that had a personal relationship with a large customer. Once the customer moved future contracts online, the supplier was no longer treated mainly as a trusted partner. It was treated as one supplier among many. The danger is commoditization. The buyer acts as there is no meaningful difference between suppliers. Then the process can become a price war or a bidding war, a bidding war. Suppliers keep lower prices to win the contract, but the winner may end up with low margins, short contracts, and weak leverage. So the lesson is winning the bid is not always winning the negotiation. Truth 40 gives several strategies, and I would group them into three. First, protect your background, and background means the best alternative to a negotiation agreement. Before entering into a bidding process, the supplier needs a clear bottom line. The current auction should not pull the supplier below the walkaway point. Second, avoid price-only bids when possible. If the only issue is price, the negotiation becomes a zero sum. A stronger approach is to submit multiple packages: a basic lower price package, a moderate package with better delivery or support, and a higher value package with customization, warranty, and engineering help. This makes the buyer compare total value, not just the price. And third is show switching costs. A large buyer may threaten to switch suppliers, but switching can incur hidden costs. Integration problems, training time, lower reliability, delays, or quality risk. These costs should be visible clearly. The larger goal is to turn an auction back into a negotiation by asking the feedback, revising the package, and showing differentiated value. For Truth 40, if you were a supplier, would you lower price or differentiate? A technical supplier may be able to offer reliability, service, customization, delivery speed, integration history, or lower risk. The harder question is when a company should walk away from a bidding war. My answer would be when the deal falls below your background, and or when the buyer clearly refuses to value anything except the lowest price. And my final takeaway is Truth 39 teaches us to manage the medium, while Truth 40 teaches us to manage the structure. In email negotiation, we need facts, tone control, and rapport. In online bidding, we need background discipline, multiple packages, and visible differentiation. The common warning is do not let technology make negotiations less human or less structured.
All right, nice job. So 39 talks about email, and I guess my view of it is that I think some things might have been missing from the text. Email is also a timing thing, right? So I send you an email and you can take your time responding, right? If I'm sitting next to you face to face, you can't sit there for half a day,
Right.
but an email can, right? So that gives you an advantage to go off and do research, to go off and look at alternatives, to talk to my competition, to maybe review your budget. So email gives both sides some flexibility, but also that flexibility has the downside of potentially losing the bid, right? So an example, just in the last 48 hours, I was on Amazon Marketplace trying to buy something. And if you've ever been on Amazon Marketplace, it's like a messaging board, right? So my message to the seller was, is this product still available, right? And does it include all the components? Because I don't want to go out and buy other components. I want everything in the package, right? So well, he took 45 minutes to respond. He said, yes, it's still available. And yes, all the components are included at that price. Great. What I should have said in my first message was, if yes to both, I will purchase the item. I will purchase it, you know, and I'm ready to come over and pick it up. Instead, I broke it into two messages. In between those two messages, you know what happened? I lost it
Yeah.
because it was such a good deal. Somebody else swooped in and picked it up before I did. And I could argue, well, wait a minute. I was waiting 45 minutes. Was it during those 45 minutes that I lost it? Was it the seller's mistake or my mistake, right? You can try to avoid the seller's mistake by saying, hey, if then, right? If the answers are yes and yes, then I will buy it, right? And that would have saved me not just 45 minutes, it would have possibly given me the order. I would have been able to purchase the item and pick it up. Now I can't find anything like it at anywhere near that price. So I've lost out, right?
And email also has one more drawback. So like you mentioned that email gives you like there's no time limit to that.
Mhm.
So on the contrary, it also sometimes it sends a weaker signal by depending on the time that you take to reply to that email. And depending on the reply, it sends a signal that why did the person take so much time?
Right.
Is the person not prepared? Did the person not have anything in mind to answer this question?
Right.
So it also negatively impacts that it shows lack of confidence or lack of preparation or awareness about the discussion at hand.
Right.
So
On Truth 40, you talked about winning isn't always winning, right? And I guess I think Truth 40 is something you should take with you everywhere you go, especially if you're working in corporate America on competitive bids. The willingness and ability to walk away is so antithetical to the culture. Most cultures that I've worked in get so wrapped up in winning, 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 right? Winning at all costs. We got to win this bid. We got to crush our competition. We have to get, time out. Some bids are actually not worth winning. The costs will be so excessive. You could actually go bankrupt on certain deals. You could fail to deliver, which will hurt your reputation and possibly destroy future deals. There's all sorts of reasons why you should think about, at least for a minute, why you would walk away, right?
and I have actually a real life story based on this. So a family friend was telling me about their business. So they're into transportation of chemicals and they work for this one specific company. So what they do is they have like a online auction, online bid for all the supplies for all their transporters. And what they do is they sneak in one or two of their own employees to bring the bid even further down.
Yeah.
So the bidding war turned so aggressive that the contractor who ended up getting the bid was barely making it even because of the bad on the company side to even draw down the contract price, the contract bid. The contractors ended up barely making it even, and they had to frequently switch the transporters, frequently build everything from the start, basically, because transport network is a very important thing when when you're transporting, like, how much, I think, kiloliters or more than that. So then that's what happened. They had to keep switching transporters and finally come back to the older transporters with a much higher contract value.
So if you're the buyer, I mean, you can ask for too much and you can try to get the price too low, where you either have bidders that shouldn't be bidding because they're not really qualified because they don't know what they're doing, or you're setting yourself up for some sort of change order down the road that they're going to say, wait a minute here, you squeeze this too far and we need compensation for this, that, or the other. Pay a fair price and expect a fair output, right?
This is an exact like a proper example for when bidding war turns into just the lowest price, then basically there is no room for discussion or to reason with the other person.
Right. And where are they going to cut corners?
Exactly.
Can you afford it? Especially if you're dealing with dangerous chemicals.
Exactly.
Do you really want to say, well, we got the lowest bid, right?
Exactly.
The lowest bid might have destroyed a community or might have caused you millions of dollars in liability.
Cause delays in the package where
Right.
it was supposed to reach much earlier.
See, as engineering managers, you're hired because you know the technology, you know the engineering, you know the implications, right? A very simple example, the Alaska pipeline has been around for 35 years. It was designed for a 20-year life. So it's almost double the original lifespan. And the way they keep it going is through rust inhibitors. They put rust inhibitors in the pipeline to keep the pipes from rusting and then breaking down and exploding, right? Well, if a manager, and this happened, the manager says, I know how to save money by skipping the rust inhibitor, which causes a blowout, which causes a huge contamination field, which causes a massive cleanup operation. We're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars, terrible press, right? It's all this, the environmentalists descend, the media descends. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. All to save a few nickels on the rust inhibitor, right? As engineers, you need to be in the discussion to say, hey, this is why we do this. Remind people of the implications. You don't change the oil in your car, your engine's going to be destroyed, right? You saved $50. Congratulations. You're going to spend $5,000 replacing the engine. It's ridiculous, but people do it all the time. You can even ask mechanics today. People are in dire straits. What are they doing? They're deferring maintenance. We've got deferred maintenance on this campus that's causing an uproar in the city of Evanston, that we're letting buildings fall apart because we were in between presidents, right? We had the interim president who didn't want to make a decision until the new president shows up. Well, that was over a year, right? And over that year, maintenance should have happened and it didn't. So we as engineers have to be part of that discussion to say, time out. There's a reason to walk away. There's a reason to put the money in. There's a reason that the lowest bid may not be your best bid. Ask yourself, is the lowest bid always your best bid? And usually the answer is no. Good companies will often throw out the high bid and throw out the low bid and deal with the people in the middle, because the assumption is they know what they're doing and they probably want the business. The high bidder doesn't want the business, and the low bidder probably doesn't know what they're doing, right? Makes sense? Any other comments? Yeah.
Deciding based purely on the numerical value. They assign a certain weightage to the numerical value depending on what type of company you're dealing with and what's the priority. What they do is they have, let's say 70% of it is gonna be the numerical low bid value, how much ever it is. But 30% of it goes to, company, reputation, number of employees, previous, executed projects of similar types, et cetera, et cetera.
The reputation.
Mostly.
Yeah.
And,
It's reputation, but also their history and legacy of delivering quality. Right. Which Motorola was always very concerned with, right? If we don't have the reputation, if we don't have the legacy, if we've dropped the ball, if we have unhappy customers, we may lose the next bid. And we were in a position where we were regularly winning 80 to 90% of all the bids, right? And we didn't want to lose that superior, market position through technical issues, through bad communication, bad project management. So that's why we invested heavily in solving the technical issues, having good project management, and setting the right expectations, right? It's all about expectation setting in the end, right? And that's what negotiations in large part are, is setting your expectations of what you can do, what you will do, what you won't do. And drawing those lines, drawing those parameters, I believe is a project manager's job. So class in the fall is going to cover a lot of that stuff too. So thank you. Nice job. Okay, I assume Venkat's not here, right? So let's move on. Let's talk about global pandemic. First of all, this is the first time I've used global pandemic in class. It's a relatively new case. I believe it's a classic coalition case, but we can look at it through different lenses. Power is one lens, right? First of all, what were your results? Who came up with a positive conclusion? You did? So let's talk about, were you on the same team, the two of you? So how did that conclude?
we all knew that all of our budgets together does not fit how much the companies are asking. So we decided, but they did not have a required payment plan. So what we came up with is, EU and US will take up the expensive medicine, majority chunk of it at least.
At the beginning.
Yeah, even if not at the beginning, and will compensate that through trade-offs in terms of tax benefits until unless we recuperate that amount.
Okay.
As to how much we have spent. So we are not going over our budget. And while we are recuperating, we will pay the company so that we don't have to pay immediately.
So you're giving them tax breaks?
Yeah, so that was giving EU and US tax breaks because we are taking up the majority chunk of expensive medicine.
Okay. So you weren't paying per dose per se what they were looking for, but you gave them other forms of compensation.
All of us stay within the budget that we have defined.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, the big Zobo problem was that Europe's budget was so low. And compared to the amount of doses that they needed.
Right.
So the only way to make up for that budget was creating a payment plan and tax cuts for trades in between these three countries. Yeah, we negotiated for a long time. We felt kind of obligated to find a deal, especially having lived through that. Gave us a little bit more like, yeah, we need to figure something
Well,
out.
people are gonna die otherwise, right? People's life.
Get back.
I like that. That's good. So who had the power and who didn't have the power in this negotiation?
I was surprised to see that US did not participate as much as I was hoping it would.
Okay,
Because first, I think that was the only country which had the good budget for the required amount of doses.
okay,
But in terms of power play, I think US and Europe did have an edge
right.
because
The companies or the government, but not the governments per se.
um,
I feel like companies didn't really get that much involved, like, as far as our negotiation went, the two companies were like, this is our price, this is how much we have,
Yeah,
figure it out.
figure it out, you guys.
Figure it out.
Come back to us, right?
We know you guys need every single dose that we have to sell, so figure it out.
Right.
Even the amount we produced didn't cover the amount they needed. So as I was one of the companies, I was Pfizer, I wasn't worried that they weren't gonna buy all my doses. Cause I know they needed it.
But what's confusing to me is why would a Pfizer say this is the only quantity we can build when creating more capacity means you could create more doses?
Right.
Why is it fixed, I guess, right? Right.
huge undertaking.
And it's a risk. Yeah, what if the virus just disappears? We were told it was just gonna disappear one day, right?
Bringing back to reality, the pandemic happened and vaccines were out. But if you scaled your company to produce such a massive amount of vaccines, after a large majority of the population had a dose, all that surplus in production capacity,
Where's it gonna go?
where's it gonna go? Cause is it they're just waiting for the next pandemic?
What if it's 20 years later,
Exactly.
right?
So it's a trade-off where you're gonna develop enough to cover the world's necessity, but not overspend in any way. That's how I would see it as a pharmaceutical company.
So this is part of a bigger picture of how pharmaceuticals are funded and justified throughout the world, right? So whether it's a cure for cancer or whether it's a heart drug or heart medication that changes the world, right? If it's developed in the US, it might cost $1 billion. And in that $1 billion, they have to recover across the entire population of those infected or affected by the disease. In which case, you're talking about potential dosage prices that are in the tens of thousands of dollars or more, which most of the world outside the US cannot afford. But the US finds a way to afford it through this complicated healthcare system that we all love to complain about, right? Insurance companies, government, Medicare, Medicaid, et cetera, et cetera. We have this structure that allows for these high prices to be absorbed by the system on behalf of those countries that can't afford these drugs at those prices, right? And in a sense, the US R&D is subsidized by US consumption, which effectively subsidizes lower prices than for the rest of the world. That's the thinking. But that thinking, I think today, 2026, is probably being dismantled by an administration that says we can't afford to do this anymore. So what's going to replace it, right?
That's the limiting factor. Certain huge pharmaceutical companies have these medications, genetics users, that cost so much that in their mind, it's not worth investing in creating a medicine that's cheaper, because they're making so much money on it. For example,
Right.
diabetes, one of the biggest ones where multiple countries are researching really low-cost solutions, whereas huge pharmaceuticals are like, no, we're good with what we have.
Well, even in the middle of your statement was a sentence that's kind of a non sequitur, right? So let's invest in a cheaper product. When it comes to pharmaceutical, I'm not so sure that that sentence makes sense. It's like saying, let's invest in low-cost housing. America doesn't know how to do that. When we build homes or whatever, we have all these regulations and requirements and materials and specifications that wind up, even a modest home is $300,000-$400,000. There's nothing low cost about it. The modest drug is $1 billion to develop, right? So how do you develop a low cost drug? Drugs become low cost because the patents expire after 20 years, and then they become public domain. The development's already done. You just have to set up manufacturing, right? You get your APIs, you get your manufacturing line, you go into business, and you're selling a product at a fraction of the cost of the original product, but it's 20 years later. And is that the model for, the rest of the world waits 20 years to get American medicines? People are dying in the meantime. They're developing their own. Right. So now you're poking your head out of the ground and you're saying, wait a minute here, the world's a big place. Where do the APIs come from? Active pharmaceutical ingredients, right? India and China, largely India, right? So wait a minute, the APIs come from there, right? And then the drugs could be developed there. And then the entire manufacturing process could be moved over there. That $1 billion price tag I keep touting is suddenly vaporized, right? It's a fraction of that. And the US has priced itself out of the market, right? So I asked the question before, who had the power? I guess the question next would be, who had the coalitions? What coalitions naturally arose from this negotiation? Given our whole discussion on coalitions. Were there coalitions?
Yeah, but I think US and Europe both had individual coalition with Gavi so that we can recuperate our costs.
Because let's face it, Gavi's the weakest player, right? Objectively, but what I just discussed in coalitions was that coalitions help bolster the weakest player.
I felt like Europe was the weakest player
Why?
because of their budget.
Budget.
Okay,
They have the same budget as Gavi essentially.
More.
with more doses.
Requirement was.
Gavi had needed more doses and it represented more countries. So
So they had buying power. Gavi was not the weakest player then,
I feel like Europe was the weakest player.
because it had lower volumes and low prices.
So, like Nick mentioned, so you're in the same team.
Yeah,
At the end, like all three, all the three parties, that is Gavi, Europe, and US had like formed a coalition at the end to distribute the doses amongst ourselves. But like Gavi had the upper hand with the price point that US and both the companies will sell to Gavi for a lower cost than the US and Europe. So the internal coalition were like, Gavi will buy all the vaccines and then redistribute it to US and Europe.
So for example, Pfizer was giving Gavi their
Cheers first.
cheapest price at 21.
okay,
But it was giving at 23 to Europe and US.
okay,
He said, why don't you buy it at 21
for everybody.
for everybody?
And then
And
become
we
like a
buy it for
massive
you.
distribution center.
Yeah, and we
Okay.
buy it from you.
Well, so is this how you finalized it? Is this through your
Yeah.
final?
Yeah, that's how we reduce the cost as much as possible.
Okay,
That's how we got the doses to Europe. Essentially,
because Europe was able to achieve the Gavi price effectively, right?
Yes.
yeah, through Gavi purchasing
Okay,
massive amounts, yeah.
And then whatever extra we were going with our entire budget as a whole
okay.
was then tackled through trades and all of these things as to how we will recuperate that amount that we're going additionally.
So how long did this take to negotiate? You did 2 hours?
Yeah.
No, it's longer than we had in class, right? So you had to do it outside the fire. Anyone else come up with a solution like that? That seems very clever, by the way, having Gavi become like a distribution center for everybody. Who else came to a conclusion?
But
Go ahead.
that was the US example.
Okay.
For me, I was exceeding the budget because I do believe that US government during the pandemic was the leader process. Exceeding the budget was like an investment for us because we are supporting our allies, helping Gavi as well. It's very well known that the US was like the mother of the world, like for people who need help in such situation. So exceeding the budget was not seen as expenditure as much as
Contribution, like a
expenditure,
okay,
but like as well as an investment for to contain to shrink the problem and to boost the economy globally. So this was like our intention. That's why we were able like to reduce the price to 21 and have people also.
but you already quoted that price when you got it. Right?
Yeah, but like Europe, which a point that they cannot afford like to buy at 23 dollars per shot. So US like take the action and ask from, I'm not sure like about the company, I forget the name of the company, but we asked the company to give us like all the available shots and at the lower price. And in here, like, we can like help our allies.
So in a sense, you're saying this is an investment. The US perspective is this is an investment to contain the virus outside the US.
Even as well as that globally, because we do care about like the economy. So US was like investing was this money to contain all the problems which might affect the economy globally. So we were like trying to help as much as possible to make things much better and to save lives as well.
Right. And that's kind of the altruism or the charitable view, right, of the situation is the US is in a position to be charitable. We've got the deep pockets. We can afford this, right? But we're also preventing these vectors from impacting, like, fast forward, 2026, what's happening today on the virus front?
Ebola,
Ebola, where's it coming from?
Congo.
Congo, DRC, right? Could it come here?
Yeah.
Is it here?
Yes.
Yes? No?
I
Maybe
mean,
so, we don't know.
We don't know. We don't know.
We don't know, we think it might be, right?
I think we're containing it. People coming in from Ebola have been tracked and they have been quarantined from what I read.
But if we kept it from coming here because we contained it, right? And wiped it out at its source, everybody benefits around the world, right? So that's your perspective.
100%. Plus, let's get back to the real problem. I do believe that I do remember that Trump at that time mentioned that he wants to walk out from the World Health Organization. And the major problem that the US was investing a lot of this problem, and the WHO was not like aligned with US for one reason that the major problem comes from China, and China did nothing to contain the problem. So US was like paying lots of money to contain the problem. However, China did not. And that's what the major blame for President Trump against WHO. They didn't take the appropriate action. And that's why the US government was like working hard to contain the problem. However, other people was not, as well as the WHO. So it's like a chain.
Right,
You need like to break it, but
it's difficult.
it's very.
The more you dig into this, the more complex it becomes, right? So again, coalitions are complex. Coalitions are unstable. Today's coalition might not be tomorrow's coalition, right? So the dynamic nature of it will often change, those links and who you're linked to. So you're saying, I think US and Europe were part of a coalition? So who is in the coalition with Gavi?
No, I think all three of us were in a coalition
At the end,
at the end, yeah.
but at the beginning, just based on like actual alliances and interests and how connected these two continent and country are, essentially, it makes it easier to the deals between them, then including Gavi and outside player. Also, supply chain issues where Gavi can have the proper refrigeration set up for the Pfizer vaccine, whereas Europe and US do. So it's like, from a pharmaceutical perspective, it's easier to sell it to Europe and the US and then,
Because the infrastructure is there.
yeah,
Right? They don't have to invest in creating a cold chain.
yeah.
Interesting, okay. Any other thoughts? Why, 2 hours is a long time, right?
Gabi fought a lot.
Gavi fought,
It got heated, yeah.
what was the source of tension from Gavi? Because they didn't want to be last in line?
No,
I think it was more on the front of,
the issue with budgets.
budgets
So-
and,
One thing about Gavi was the budget was 23.3 million. And that was possible to achieve only if they take all the cheap vaccines at about 1 billion, I think, something. And the 1.1 billion, we had to buy 2 billion vaccines. And that is what, 20% of the total population.
Right.
So we were already buying the minimum doses, and the way the case mentioned the budget was that only if we buy up all the cheapest vaccines, that is when we are able to meet the budget. And considering Gavi represents all the lower income countries, so going over the budget was not an option.
and that's the same thing was represented by EU, because we can achieve our budget only if we buy almost 60%, 70% of the lower cost vaccine.
Yeah, the Gavi price,
Yeah,
right?
so, now the issue was, the budget in itself was about 10 to 12 billion short cumulatively.
Right.
So how do we make up for that money? How do we,
Yeah.
yeah, we have to look for different payment plans, we have to look for different ways of, and the major issue came in was, everybody expected EU to have a much higher budget.
Yeah,
Nobody trusted the fact that
nobody
EU had
trusted
no
the
budget.
number that Europe was the ballpark. Because you couldn't reveal it, right?
Yeah, I couldn't reveal the budget, and I'm telling them this is not gonna happen.
So that's when tension came in, and like, there's no way this is your number.
But you know, in the real world, there's another set of negotiations going on between the representatives at the table and their governments, right? So Europe could have gone back and said, hey, I need more money to basically get what we need for our people. So there's a set of secondary negotiations going on. All of this in a very complex whirlwind form, right? You've been very quiet. What happened with your negotiation?
It was much different than theirs in that the countries didn't create a coalition, they sort of thought/negotiated against each other.
And it spiraled into the ground?
No, and then it came up to the company representatives to create good deals. So I was vector, and I had to take into account their population, how many vaccines they needed.
So the company reps became mediators.
Yeah, pretty much. I was like, I will try to meet 50% of your population. And therefore, whatever that number would be in relationship to the other populations, extrapolate the percentage of each population to then your percentage of vaccines. I have a better relationship with Europe, so I'm going to give you a better deal in the US, but also Gavi needs more vaccines. So let's prioritize Gavi. I think I said like 500 million doses for Gavi, something like, these were in the numbers, but let's say 200 for the US and 300 for Europe. That's not the actual number, but that was sort of the relationship ratios.
Okay.
And I was like, that sounds humanitarian and ethical, but if you wanna negotiate with each other, you can do that.
So you had a conclusion or you did not?
We concluded in the numbers, yeah,
Okay,
and we added some additional elements such as investments
okay.
into vector.
Similar to you guys, where you were looking at tax breaks, I guess, right? So you were looking at investments?
Yeah, but those benefited me as a company, so they looked at it benefiting in each country. In my negotiation, things benefited in my company.
So you were able to effectively lower the price per dose
Uh,
as a company?
lower, I'm not sure, because we ended up paying more for the doses.
Okay,
Yeah, because the US and Europe wanted more,
okay.
and so.
Well,
they ended
you're
up-
adding the investment into
Yeah,
the
yeah,
price per
yeah.
dose, okay.
Exactly.
What I'm saying is effectively, the real price per dose is lower because you have this investment line that's compensated for. Okay, cool. How long did it take for you?
Until we have a class, so I think.
Oh,
an
An
hour
hour
and a
and a
half.
half. Yeah. Anyone else? Good case? Complex? You see why I put it at the end? I could have had multi-party negotiations, but I thought this one kind of captured it all. And it gave you a sense of what might happen in the real world. We might be seeing it again with Ebola, we might be seeing it again with nuclear arms, we might be seeing it again with war. We're gonna have a multi-party war like we have in Iran right now. See, what do we have? Iran, Lebanon, right? Syria, US, Israel, right? You can imagine them getting together saying, we gotta put an end to this.
Technically Russia, proxy.
Okay, Russia's in there too. There might be a few others. You know, they all have their different objectives. They all have their different exit criteria and they all have their different constraints. You know, we all learned in 407 how to optimize constraints. How is this different from 407?
I mean, like, in this, everybody is looking out for their very own, benefit.
Right.
It's not, towards a single goal, rather it's towards personal goals.
So you have multiple
Personal
conflicting goals,
Yes,
right?
So-
So that makes 407 look like a piece of cake, right? Because in 407, you had a singular goal that everyone agreed to. Right? As opposed to multiple goals that nobody agrees to. And it's also subject to an over-constrained problem. As you noticed, you had to bring in solutions from outside. 407 doesn't deal with that, right? 407 says everything you need is right here on this piece of paper, and you're saying, no, no, no. If you add it all up, then you can't get there. So you had to go beyond that piece of paper, right? And I assume that's what you did too, right? So you did the tax breaks, right? And you did the other incentives, so. I'm glad you guys got something out of this. Coalitions is something that hopefully you will think about, not just in a positive sense about how I can form a coalition. Who's my logical partner? How can we benefit from each other mutually? Also think in a negative sense, who's gonna be coalesced against us? Who's gonna be forming coalitions like BRICS, right? That are anti your position, and how can they benefit? And what can you do to counter that, right? And that's where I think right now is a little bit of a political commentary. The US has not formed a counter to the BRICS nations. The BRICS nations have methodically, over a period of years, accumulated a coalition that's quite powerful, if you ask me, and potentially quite effective. The US and the West has done almost nothing to counter that. I feel as if we've allowed the BRICS to fester and grow. And this happens in corporate America all the time. You underestimate your competitor too long, and they eventually become overwhelming. Right? Hotel industry and Airbnb, the taxi industry, Uber and Lyft, right? Always, there's this underestimation of the competitor, right? And then you wind up with a collapse of some sort on your side, right? On the AI side, NVIDIA just came out with a edge-based platform that might put cloud AI out of business. $250 GPU board that effectively can compete with a cloud-based solution, right? What does that mean? Are we building too many data centers? And are we on the right path with data centers when we could have edge-based solutions sitting on your laptops instead, right? All right, let's pivot to summer interns. Summer interns makes global pandemic look like a piece of cake, right? Summer interns was easy. Yeah. Should have taken less than an hour, maybe 45 minutes, right? Who came up with a conclusion on summer interns? Okay, let's hear your story. What happened?
So I was, so I negotiated with my partner for about 45 minutes. We landed on that I would get 2 hours of engineering side. I would have to keep both interns. I was told that personnel had hired interns for me already. I don't know if that's, I wouldn't know what amount it was, but that also made me feel much better that I would have help to meet my deadlines. I extrapolated that it was maybe 2 other interns, so I'm going to have 4 in the summer. Engineering is going to pay for one of them, which is ideal for my objectives, but if personnel will pay for the other one. And for changing the system, engineering will now be involved in hiring, and then we get to interview the applicant in some round of interviews like normal companies do. The GPA requirement will stay on for now, but we will use my interns for the summer and the interns of the personnel hired to compare the basis of how much GPA helps and maybe in the future make a change. That was it.
Got it, okay. Sounds similar to what you guys came up with? So it looks like there isn't that much of a Zopac here, right? It looks like you've got 2 very contradicting teams that have worked in isolation of each other. And now they have to reconcile the fact that you've got human beings being onboarded, and not everybody is accepted by the other team, right?
So we negotiated together. So another thing I felt was this negotiation was more of I think a one-to-one or a warning sort of a thing than a negotiation, because the zone was so wide that the other person just had to agree to, keeping in check with the policies of the company and not repeat this mistake again. So it felt like it wasn't much of a negotiation than a warning of sort, a polite warning. But yeah,
It's more of a
that's
dis-
how it was mentioned in the case, that you have to make sure that the other person does not do this again and things like that. It was a bit negatively, yeah. So it's
It's not gonna end. Well, in many ways, this is a dispute, right? And disputes require that both sides kind of share their view of the situation, right? In many cases, a dispute is mediated by a third party. There's no third party, right? You've got the 2 parties self-mediating each other, basically saying, let's come up with some solution. It's a dispute is a rejected claim, right? I claim that these are not my interns, or the other side might claim that these are your interns, even though we hired them, right? A dispute basically is a rejected claim that needs to be resolved for the company to go forward. You often get stagnated, you get blocked, because this disputed claim becomes paralysis, right? We don't know what to do. Mediator will try to get both sides to vent their view of the situation, then brainstorm potential solutions, and then come up with the mutually agreeable solutions within that as a subset, right? Is that effectively what you did? Okay, so it didn't take that long, really. The emotions were set aside. Were there emotions? Because usually disputes have a lot of emotion,
They were told to have emotions by the case.
but
so
you
my-
refused.
Yeah, because my side of the case, on the engineering side, it said to be impatient, to be succinct, to refuse to base claims. But I needed to keep my interest and I needed to fight for this. And I tried to use our personality at the beginning, saying like, I am right, blah, blah, blah. But after 10 minutes of negotiating with that horrible personality, I was just like, this is not going to work. I immediately asked, I don't think we're going anywhere with this. What is the goal of this negotiation? And after I realized he wanted it to preserve the brand image and just improve the company, I wanted it to meet my deadlines and not lose money for the company. So we're all trying to work for the benefit of the company. I just switched my personality to my normal personality when negotiating, which is like, can we find a good middle ground? Instead of
That was
just
the only way to get through this, right?
Yeah.
And for those who took project management, Amanda, the parallel would be the Amanda case, that did have a mediator. That was a dispute case, right? And frankly, the pie analogy breaks down, right? It's just like, are you expanding the pie? Are you partitioning the pie? I'm not even sure the pie even makes sense anymore, because this isn't traditional bargaining. Right, there's no price involved, there's no valuation. Basically, you have a problem that is a rejected claim that needs to be solved, because you can't go forward without it, right? Any other solutions to summer interns that make sense for you guys? Did anyone not have a solution? Nope, you all came to one? What did you think of summer interns? Alan, what did you think?
Interesting. It started with a lot of, like, as we were saying, more of like a risk situation where, so I was engineering and my counterparty was basically just talking about blades for a long time. one of the concession points was like, I should fire me instead of points. So I think that was like a sore spot for them, which I noticed pretty early on. But we tried to, basically say that, okay, this is already done now. We've hired 2 people, you also hired 2 people. What can we do in the future to make sure that this situation doesn't happen again? So we basically talked about, engineering being more hands-on in the hiring process with personnel and actually interviewing and evaluating, the people that are coming in. And then I think in terms of the training hours every week as well, that's something we also negotiated on. That, our interns would join the training program for 2 hours, except when, their workload is more, and then maybe they could do something online or like catch up with it, in a following week. And in terms of the 2 interns, we agreed that personnel will pay for the 2 interns that we hired, for now, and then next year, we will pay for the 2 interns that are hired, so. Kind of just trying to meet each other halfway, but it didn't start that way in the beginning. It was very much like, you guys, engineering made this huge mistake, which you always do. You guys are terrible people, and we don't want to work with you. And then towards the end, we kind of met in the middle.
So HR and engineering traditionally are at odds with each other. I think for engineering, it's a war of convenience. What I mean by that is, we don't like interviewing people, we don't like hiring people, but ironically, we need people in engineering all the time to backfill, to grow, to fill in gaps, skill sets, et cetera, projects that have come in. We always need new people, but we want to do engineering work. We don't want to do interviewing. We don't want to look at resumes. We don't want to go to meetings that talk about resume reviews. We don't want to deal with interns until they show up, and then we want them and meet them and scoop them up. So engineers, frankly, if you think about it, we don't make any sense at all. Right? We're partially insane in that we say one thing, but we do another, right? So when I was at WMS, we had a goal of hiring 100 engineers, year after year after year. Why? Because we couldn't do it the previous year. We always screw up, right? But we weren't guilty at all. See, engineering is clean because HR gave us really bad candidates. HR dropped the ball. HR doesn't know what they're doing. They're posting jobs that, don't match up what we're, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we had somebody to blame, HR, right? We just throw dirt at them all day long. Meanwhile, we tell people that we're short on resources, we can't hit our dates, our quality is falling apart because we don't have, does this sound familiar? Our quality is falling apart because of the right skill set just walked out the door. We don't have any backfill, right? All these really sad stories that could have been solved if we were partnered with HR instead of at war with them.
I think that was a key part in our negotiation, that we're just not communicating well enough.
You don't communicate with those that you're at war with, do you?
Yeah, and I think, the first thing that, as part of a solution, the first thing that we said to each other was, if you want the right people, you tell me what you want. And, I was the HR representative, so that's the first thing, like, if, even with the GPA requirement, I did not say, okay, no, we're gonna drop the GPA requirement. But if there's a specific set of coursework that you need, we will hold that GPA requirement to those specific coursework instead of.
But not general,
Not general,
basket week
yeah.
grades and stuff, right? Okay. That makes sense,
I
yeah.
think the case mentions that, I think Wayne's character has done this multiple times before. And he's been in the company for 17 years, I guess. So it's been going on before as well, and the person had to use their temp worker budget previously. So a small thing that we did in our case was that the 2 engineers that engineers that they hired. So like engineering is gonna pay for them, but it will be for one engineer, it will be taken out of the bonuses. And for the second engineer, it will be taken out of the team budget that is set for, let's say, other activities or anything like that.
Yeah, reward and recognition budgets and stuff like that.
So we decided on removing, taking out budget for one engineer like that, and one for the team building activities and things like that.
Okay,
So that it doesn't happen again. And to set a precedent among other teams, because other teams were also they want to go ahead and hire by themselves.
right, work outside of HR,
Mhm.
which means you don't have one internship program, you've got 100 of them.
Yes.
which causes a lot of other problems, right? And even engineering can understand that, so. To finish my story with WMS, after 3 years of the CEO watching this nonsense between HR, who says, we sent them 100 resumes, they didn't even interview 5 of them, right? And engineering who says, yeah, we got a bunch of terrible resumes and HR doesn't know what they're doing, and so each group pointing at each other. And meanwhile, the performance is totally in the gutter, terrible performance, we hired a handful of people instead of 100. The CEO says, I have the answer. And we're not gonna debate it. We're going to India. The engineers drop their jaws, the HR people drop their jaws. Oh, what? And they said, Mark, you're in charge. We don't have any presence in India. We don't even have a law firm. We don't have an entity. We don't, it's just like, fix it, fix it, fix it. Here's money. Set up an office, rent some space, 100 people, 4 months, get it done. 4 months, not 12. Thank you, right? 4 months in a country 6,000 miles away, right? Where we have no presence at all. They don't even know the brand. The brand had no traction, right? They understood our competitors, but not us. We didn't even have a strategy. Tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, proximity to major cities. We don't have any of that stuff. We had to figure all that out. We even had to figure out whether they're going to be badged employees or outsourced third-party employees. We didn't have any of that. We got it all done in 5 months. We hired 100 people. Turnover was nominal, very low. We thought it was going to be high, just traditionally this time. Less than 10% turnover. I'm told, since I left, that 100-person team in India is now 300 people. The people in Chicago largely been laid off. So fewer people here, more people there. Sound familiar, right? And the war between HR and engineering has solved itself in a way that neither of them would have chosen, right? Both would have chosen and preferred to hire local people. Either we couldn't find them or the war kept us from finding them. And if you put a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you which. I suspect it's the war. Is Chicago that barren of resources? Probably not. But India had we had no problem filling those slots. I mean, candidate after candidate was showing up, especially since we posted salaries that were higher than local. So we paid a premium and we got good quality people and they were happy and we were happy. It's time for a break. It's almost 10:30. Let's come back at about 10:40 and we'll start with team presentations and I'll put them up on the board and you can see, hopefully you guys are ready to present. Be ready to put on Zoom with your laptop so we can easily just go from one team to the next, okay? See you in 10.
Thank you.
How did you like the debriefs? Good, okay.
It's very interesting to see how other people negotiated for local.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
yeah.
curious. For our final presentation, Matthias, should we just share the video or
You can do it either way, whatever you
Okay.
prefer.
share the slides? It won't be as clean as the video is, but if you want it to be very brief, we could definitely.
Yeah, let's try to keep it briefer because I think
Yeah.
people just want to get out.
So then we do have a video, which I think sort of like
The
a
shorter?
video within a video. Yeah, yeah.
The shorter video?
Yeah, explaining some things. So we'll then probably put it up, share that video explaining something, and
Okay.
then present some other aspects.
That's
Yeah,
good,
yeah,
okay.
combination. Yeah.
Sounds good, thank you. I had such a blast going to India and doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
We think we have diversity. Then I went to India and there's diversity. It's like, wow. Well,
So, the written script changes, the language changes, the beliefs changes.
Yeah.
God dictated change.
yeah,
And it's just weirdly accommodating of everything.
yeah, which is why I think it's so easy for folks from India to adapt to our culture because our culture is much narrower. The culture out there is so wide, right? And you've got different religions, you've got different practices, you've got different beliefs, different languages, different regions. It's just like, wow. And for everybody to get along, first of all, they don't all get along. That's one thing I learned, right? But just even something simple like let's put all the holidays on the board, right? Including the US holidays. It's like there's nothing left for work. I mean,
One thing, it doesn't come up to that much.
yeah, people still get the job done.
US goes on a long holiday at the end of the year during Christmas and New Year.
And India does smaller chunks.
People working on 12th of January because according to the budget, you work on 12th of January, you work throughout the year.
So it's like superstition.
It's not. Should I work because, you know, day one, you're going up, you're getting up, getting something done.
Uh-huh.
It just stays with you. I think it's more psychological for me at least.
Is that why the
Or is work done throughout the day.
So do you think that's why the army says make your bed before you do anything else? Make your bed first thing in the morning? It's just like who gives a damn about your bed? But the army does, right? I think it's because of that, the psychology of you've done one thing in the first thing, you'll get more things done, right?
Because of big MNCs, most companies are actually working on Diwali, which is,
Really?
yeah,
Wow, okay.
I think they have some sort of thing that they're going to work for a bit.
But some things we did not budget for that became really obvious, like for example, food. Our location wasn't very close to any food, restaurants or so we wound up and we didn't have a cafeteria in the building, so we had to bring food in every day. Catered food every day, hot meals. No, we discovered it was affordable, but I mean, you still have to multiply it times every day of the year, which in the US we never do that. And maybe Google, I guess, has cafeterias that are free. Do they still? Do they still have good cafeterias? Okay, they haven't shut that down.
It was like 2 years ago. Google has the best office across the globe. Hands down. Hitachi's office was horrible. I did not want to go back to something.
Well, I can tell you the Apple or the Google office in Chicago was very nice. I was visiting one of our alum, Asghar Ali, and he took me around and the food was amazing. I mean, but that was 2 years ago. I thought by now maybe they shut it down. They're laying people off, but they're keeping the chefs.
Even so working for. I mean, then it's the same thing. If you're working for Google, you have those benefits.
Yeah,
If you don't have the benefits, then might as well go and work.
yeah, I hear you. Well, it is a good company, and I believe in Gemini.
If you look at Canvas, the only way to get like 100 on the course is if you do the extra credit. Wait, it's the extra credit.
You can get 100 without extra credit.
So it is actually extra
It's
credit.
actually, it'll be added,
Okay,
yeah, it's something that I mentally correct as I.
okay, because yeah, the math inside Canvas.
Because there's really no other way, Canvas isn't set up for it.
Right.
Right, I mean, and you either add up to 100 points or you don't, if they add up to 95, then the best you can do is 95, so. The way it works is I basically, if you do the extra credit, I'll add the bumper to whatever you achieved, and it pushes you to the next grade, so be it.
And one more question.
Mhm.
I did the Amanda case and
Yeah, what do you think?
I did it in the PMT.
Yeah,
So I,
but there's other.
yes, I also did the John Nash one,
Okay, good,
but I was, I'm gonna test it out today.
okay,
See if I wanted to feed the 3 roles into AI
okay.
and ask it to create 3 separate agents to negotiate and make vision. Also,
You just,
Yeah.
even though you've had it done it before.
that's why I didn't want
You
to do
did
it
it by
like.
hand, you did it with humans.
Yes, so now I want 3 agents to
This is
negotiate.
the first time I've ever used AI.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't think it was as robust as I was hoping it would be.
I feel like purchasing for companies could be done entirely by AI. It would be a lot easier marketing and.
But it's not very clear.
No, that's the issue. You gotta, it's strict on what you give it. There's no expanding the pie. It's essentially what you give it, it is what it is.
There's no creativity. Can you imagine trying to do the global pandemic?
People would die.
People would have done.
Yeah.
Just no creativity. The solutions that you guys came up with, no way I would think.
No, yeah, I see it there. It's more for like strict buying some scenarios where.
Right? Even, our first meeting up for,
No, because the house would not have been.
except for requiring creativity, AI doesn't have it.
I'll try that today. I'll give it some prompts.
Yeah, try Zephyr, see if you can get the same solution. You'd have to prompt it, re-prompt it, re-read.
Yeah.
I think you had to put it. Because that's what I noticed, is that every time I fed AI with negotiations, it would be the middle of the row, kind of the middle of it, and I had to push it, yeah. And sometimes it wouldn't go. So I mean, when I sense you help you.
Yes.
The case,
Yeah.
that was one, that was one of my teeth.
Yeah, that's the one that I found.
It's the same one. Much more detailed than it was free,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
That's nice.
Yeah.
And then, yeah. So, are you gonna be on the? Oh, okay. So we.
So Victoria, do you mind leading us off? Apple versus FBI, Matthias is online.
Yes. So we will, our slides and our video, the slides were meant to be 20 minutes, the video is 20 minutes. So our plan is to sort of speed through them,
Okay,
not reading the content that's on the slides. You'll see a lot of text because it was meant to be a video,
okay,
rather just speaking.
that's good. Yeah, as long as we can keep it kind of short because we've got about what, 80 minutes and we got 6 teams.
So absolutely. we'll
So, you know,
keep it-
just doing the math, right?
Is it okay if then we're
Yeah.
sort of, the video is the one that's assessed?
Sure.
reviewed? Yeah.
Yeah, whatever you think makes sense. I trust you after all this. We've been through a lot together. So you're a master's in mechanical, right? So this must be very different from what you normally take. What did you think of the class?
I love it. I'm recommending it to everyone.
Great, so next year I'll be inundated with students. Hey, I'm fine with that. We got a lot of empty seats, but the question is, how come people don't take the class more often? It seems like it would apply to almost everybody.
No, yeah, I wish. So mechanical engineering, the bachelor's, it has a requirement for public speaking.
But that's not the same
This
thing.
would count. No, but I wish that this would count, because an engineer has to do public speaking, but we have our final capstone, like our degree capstone, and all of the other classes where we do public speaking.
Yeah.
But no one teaches you how to negotiate. So I think that this could.
Why don't you petition your department to say, make this at least an option?
Yeah.
An option, because some people might not want, this can make people uncomfortable negotiating, but public speaking can make them even more uncomfortable. So, but they're two totally different skills. All right, guys, we're gonna get started. So grab your seats. Apple versus FBI will be first, Emergence Capital second, Faro Energy third, Google versus China fourth, Meta, Google, Amazon fifth, and then Southern Cal Permanente sixth. Emergence was second. Yeah, Genova, there is no Genova AI, so. Feel free. So for those who don't know, Matthias is online. I think he's in some remote part of California. God knows where. You still with us, Matthias?
Yep, here from San Francisco.
San Francisco, there you go. Pretty remote. I'm told you guys are like drying up out there. There's no water.
Well, I mean, I have water in my apartment, so that's all I care about.
That's
for
all you
now.
care about. I got it. Okay.
Data centers are taking it all.
It's not just data centers, it's the aquifers that are drying up too, so. And we're in the middle of a drought, so triple whammy. Apple versus FBI.
Hear me well from my computer?
Matthias, can you hear Victoria?
Yeah,
Okay, great. So today I'm going to be presenting with Matthias here on the case of FBI versus Apple. We actually prepared this presentation to be 20 minutes and we submitted a video. So we're actually going to cut it short to give you the TLDR on many of the aspects. But you will notice as we start sharing things and we prepared a video summarizing the negotiation itself, that this wasn't so much of a normal negotiation. It wasn't what we practiced here in class. It was more of a lawsuit, and within that lawsuit, they negotiated a lot, and they negotiated with public opinion to see who was right. So, getting into the case, let me try sending the video.
I guess as a lot of these cases are lawsuits, just think of a lawsuit as a negotiation under the gun.
Correct. Let me see how I.
So, the inciting incident drops us straight into this totally sterile conference room. The script fittingly dubs it the walled garden. Right in the center of a massive white table sits a blocked 5 by 5 table along two chairs. On one side of the table, there are Julie, Harry, and Buddy sitting. On the other side, he's sitting Apple CEO standing, he's wearing his signature electoral and sitting next to his very nervous tenant here. Now, he did say focus negotiation with one honest, it's like a completely rational straight movement. He goes to the phone and he's born to ask him, right? That is there exactly 10,000 possible motivations from.
Can they understand that? Is that going too fast for you guys?
Yes, okay. So we'll try something out.
Is it possible to just walk us through the key slides? Yeah.
So let's get into the actual case and then we'll explain a bit more into the details. Here we have two parties that are negotiating, Apple and the FBI, but this is not the Apple that we know today. Apple back then had a new CEO, Tim Cook, who had to sort of prove himself and to the shareholders of who he was as a leader following Steve Jobs. And on the FBI, there had been many cases that I will outline in a second, showing that they had been disputing the idea of the encryption and the going dark problem. But what was this going dark problem? Well, let's get into the timeline. In 1994, CALIA passed. Basically, the FBI got approval to wiretap authority over telephone and software encryption. Then in 2013, they had these known revelations where specifically some info was brought into the public eye, and therefore it created distrust among bank companies. And getting into the future, 2014 and 2015, we see here that iOS 8 was shipped, and that changed the entire landscape for encryption and software. But how did that happen? And I think that's Matthias.
Matthias?
So essentially, first we have the legal crisis. There was a terrorist attack in San Bernardino, which forced a public collision between government and Apple. Then there was the technical impasse where the FBI wanted access to government OS, so like internal or a backdoor to the Apple systems and the decennial legacy. So 10 years later, we'll show how this case still shapes encryption law globally. Next, yeah. So just to give a quick background on the crisis, two people opened fire at the Inland Regional Center in San Bernardino. They were essentially, well, subsequently killed by the police, and they recovered the phone of one of the perpetrators or the terrorists. And the FBI believed it might contain encrypted communications, so that's why they wanted access to the system.
But let's look at actually what did this phone contain? We're looking at the Apple iPhone series, where specifically it had an A6 chip and an iOS 9.0. This meant that it had an interesting security gap. The model lacked what they called the secure enclave that we found in later iPhones, meaning that its passcode was software protected. And so the device, as many of you might remember from this iPhone, was locked with a 4-digit passcode, but it was set to auto erase after 10 failed attempts. And so for the negotiation constraints, we see here that when the FBI tried getting into the iPhone, we had the following constraints. Firstly, for auto erase, they saw that after 10 failed attempts, the passcode would be erased. Rate limiting, they had a specific speed at which they needed to go. Again, if you remember this iPhone, you could try 4 attempts within an hour, then that hour converted into 24 hours, then that 24 hours into a month, if you remember anything from that. And then that they couldn't actually use their own code. Apple would only allow Apple code to be operated into the iPhone, and that's why the FBI couldn't just hack into it.
So one of the major failures was that the FBI directed the owner of the phone, which was the employer of the terrorist, to reset the iCloud password. And what this triggered is an algorithm that Apple essentially can't control, which locks out everyone from trying to access the system itself. So Apple afterwards testified that if the password hadn't been reset, they could have simply just brought the phone to a familiar Wi-Fi signal and pulled the data automatically. So if the FBI wouldn't order the county to reset the password, then all of this situation would never even escalated.
And so getting into the encryption architecture in itself, we see here that the way that the iPhone was encrypted is that it had a UID, a unique device identifier. Basically, it meant, as I said before, that the FBI couldn't use their own software, and that ensured that the original hardware had to be present into the iPhone as well. So again, the FBI could not get into this iPhone hardware-wise or software-wise unless Apple helped. Getting into the legal side of things, we see here that the way that everything was set up was back in 1789, where specifically the DOJ created a 237-year-old law back then, arguing that a valid research warrant could actually compel Apple to provide reasonable technical assistance. So when the FBI asked Apple for help, this law from 1789 compelled Apple to help them.
And so the three things that the FBI was essentially demanding from Apple was to be able to bypass the erasure, so modify iOS so it never deletes encryption keys, regardless of how many attempts you make. Then number two was the electronic entry. They wanted to allow passcode guesses to be submitted programmatically. So instead of having to sit down and punch the numbers, you can do it with a computer and try millions of combinations automatically. And the last one was removing the rate limiting. So instead of having that, having to wait between an attempt and another, they wanted to be able to just run everything, in one go. And the main thing here is that Apple called this government OS proposition as something that was technically possible, but it would create, create something far too dangerous to ever exist. So on February 16 of 2016, Tim Cook published an open letter to Apple customers, and this was very transcendental because he, from the get-go, made sure that, or made clear that this wasn't going to be handled quietly, and kind of cater for the public opinion to be on their side, essentially, by showing that Apple was, looking out for their customers and looking out for the safety of everyone, not just the people in the US, or Apple had millions of customers all over the world. So by going public immediately, Apple kind of changed the nature of the dispute, because it became a national and international conversation, not just a court case.
And so let's look here specifically at what Apple could do to win in this negotiation. There were two steps to the negotiation. The first one where the FBI approached Apple and said, hey, can you help us? And Apple basically said no, which created this huge public dispute that we're going to show in a second how it affected Apple's view as a company. And then when they went into the courtroom, what Apple could actually do. So we saw that the FBI had this law back then saying that from 1789, that they could compel Apple to do work. But Apple said, well, that's not true. If we look at these three things right here, the First Amendment, Fifth Amendment, and the separation of powers, the Constitution shows that as a company, I don't have to obey you. I am my own entity. And secondly, that you cannot tell me to give you my computer code, because computer code is actually protected speech. And here is what the people thought. So once this got into the public eye because of the lawsuit, we saw that actually a lot of people supported the FBI. As you can see in a mass shooting and a massacre, people will usually support the big guys or the FBI for protecting the population. But still, 38% of people supported Apple. They understood that what was going on is that Apple wanted to help. They wanted to understand what was inside of that iPhone, but that the FBI had committed many mistakes, therefore affecting the negotiation.
And now, beyond the courtroom and public opinion, we'll talk about the financial impact to Apple. And as you can see, well, during the 6-week legal battle from December 2015 to February 2016, Apple's stock fell roughly 19 to 30%. And market analysts noted that this was also tied to just general markets situation with the smartphones, but the legal standoff did add a layer of geopolitical risk that accelerated some sell-off. And investors were mainly concerned about if Apple was seen as having cooperation agreements with the U.S. government, then that might alienate international markets as China or Europe.
And so we see here that this actually had a long-term effect on Apple. Specifically, we see here this 3 trillion threshold, showing that by 2024, Apple's market cap reached and exceeded $3.2 trillion. And this helped to create what we call the walled garden. Specifically, the two things shown on the other side, that Apple started selling the privacy as a product. The privacy that the FBI wasn't able to breach and get it through, or you will see it in a second, as their own product, through their apps, through their software, and many other things. And so we see right here the big implications humanity-wise. Even though many people supported the FBI, because again, there was a mass shooting, which was a horrible event, a lot of people supported Apple because they knew that if Apple showed it, that there was a code, a piece of hardware that people could crowd into an iPhone to get it to work and hack it, then anyone else could do it. And this software enclave and the encryption that they created protects people. It protects countries, journalists, and everyone else who might have information in there that they don't want to share and sell.
So tying it all back to negotiations, this is how Apple essentially framed their negotiation strategy. First, they have the power anchor, which basically Apple centered around the debate that it's mathematically impossible for a safe backdoor to exist. So that was where they're anchoring their arguments. And then we have the moral crusading, which could transform what could have been framed as a corporate self-interest into more of a defense of liberty. They built a coalition including Google, Meta, the ACLU, and the EFF. And what this accomplishes is that it neutralized the FBI's attempt to isolate Apple as unpatriotic, for example. And then we have finally the public pressure as well. The FBI tried to use this tragedy as a leverage, but Apple centered or countered, sorry, by reframing the risk. This would affect, not just one person, but billions of devices. So they were keeping the pressure on by just reminding everyone of the scale of the impact that this would entail.
And so how could the negotiation have changed? And this might be one of the final slides. Many things could have actually helped the negotiation go better before it actually became a lawsuit. We saw again that if the FBI had worked with Apple from the get-go, instead of trying to get it through the iPhone and messing it up, that could have solved this entire situation. Again, most of this was onto the FBI, not Apple's fault. And then if the FBI and their team had synced with each other, they could have created better solutions that might have actually gotten through the software. And so, to settle the project, what actually ended up happening is that the FBI paid an Australian firm to create a software to get it through this iPhone. And when they were able to unlock it, there wasn't anything important inside of it, just a receipt from a lunch that the person had, but nothing else. So in the end, was this worth it? Was it worth it to have a lawsuit and more? Those are the biggest questions. And it cost, by the way, $1 million.
So, yeah, perfect. I was gonna say, in the interest of time, let's skip that one. And then let's go to how the battle ended. So the phone was opened and almost nothing was resolved. Essentially, the final section will cover the actual settlement. Do you want to cover this one, Victoria? Or?
Sure.
Okay.
So we see here that it died because that set a precedent for the future when it came to encryption. Many companies started using the Apple products and this approach of how companies and tech software companies can actually create encryption enclaves to protect people. And so in the future, we see that this can affect many other countries and what's coming up, especially with AI. So as we see many lawsuits that might use AI for different things, I think a case like this might be coming up. Okay.
All right, nice job. Thank you. Were you guys even aware that this happened? Was it in your consciousness, right? CALIA was a law that passed when I was at Motorola, and I was pretty surprised that the FBI would have that kind of access, but it was mandated by law, right? So as Motorola, we didn't have much choice but to comply. At the time, we were the leading cell phone supplier. We were well beyond, Apple wasn't even in the picture. They weren't even thinking about making phones. And CALIA was something that we had to comply with, just like all the other manufacturers. And there didn't seem to be that much public debate. And just as we're hearing now, there's not much public consciousness of what's going on. So I encourage you as technologists to be part of the public debate about privacy and security, because these things often are in tension with each other. And there's no clear answer. I think it was Benjamin Franklin who said, you can choose one, you can have the other, but if you have security as your highest priority, you will probably never have privacy and you will probably never have liberty. And you will sacrifice your liberty to do that, right? So, and well, by the way, security is an illusion. So in that sense, he was saying, don't chase the illusion. But I mean, that's a 300-year-old argument, right? And it's still going on. Questions, comments? All right. Yeah.
This case, and also like Lucian and Lucian has done this a lot, how laws from the 1800s or 1700s are still being used today for different reasons.
If it hasn't been overturned, if it hasn't been overruled or supplanted, then it makes sense. But, and I guess I was more interested in the negotiation piece than the legal piece, because frankly, the legal piece is just maneuvering. But negotiations is where the real discussions and the real compromises can occur, right? And is that what you saw here?
Well, we didn't see an actual negotiation at any point outside of the lawsuit. So I think they negotiated inside of the lawsuit with the laws that we're talking about as leverage,
Right.
trying to sort of push each other even further, saying you're going against American standards, you're going against what America stands for, using public opinion as leverage as well.
Right.
But Apple just wouldn't budge, which
Right.
is very interesting.
Well, I guess I'm proud of Apple. I mean, I'm an Apple customer. Obviously, I've got Apple equipment, but I also have a lot of resentment towards Apple too. So we'll see. Would you say Google would have reacted the same way?
Yeah, so Apple, Google and Facebook back then supported Apple.
Okay.
100%.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because they knew that was their It was their
Everybody-
destiny too, right? Not just Apple's,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Nice job. I've got Emergence Capital next.
Hi everyone, I'm gonna talk about Emergence Capital and Unify today. So let me take you back on a Saturday evening in 2024 in April, when Jake Spear, who is a partner at Emergence, got a call from the CEO of Unify, who was vacationing somewhere in a rural Mexico place. But he had to attend that call because it was about that Unify had got a huge, offer for the next series of round. And that was not only the catch. The catch was that it was time bound. It was just 72 hours of time, which the Silicon Valley based fund raising company has offered to Unify. So our case is around that phone call and what happens in the next 72 hours. So before getting into what happened, let me give you a brief background about both Unify and Emergence. So Unify was founded by two Ryerson University graduates back in 2023. Austin, who is the CEO, and he was the guy who has the experience in sales and marketing. The next is Connor, who is the AI guy. And back in 2023, it was just a 20-people firm. So what basically they do is they help companies, especially the sales side, to reach out to their customers, give them a messaging in a way that it feels like very personalized. So they go through different sites, retrieve the data, and then send them a personalized message, seeing like if they're interested in the product or not. On the other side, you can see Capital Emergence, who is one founded in 2023. It's one of the biggest firm who has initially invested in Salesforce, Zoom, and Box. So they believe that they have, put it based on the right kind of firms since the beginning. So Jake has a good role to play here because he's the one who look out for AI and agentic software-based investments, and we'll see how it happened. Like Unify, he was also working closely with Unify in that case. This is the 14 months timeline that you see. So in 2023, it got founded with two of the graduates, and early 2023, they raised their seed round of around 6.6 million. Which was co-led by OpenAI, Thrive, and Emergence that we're going to talk about. And Emergence, throughout the period of 12 or 14 months, was totally involved with, Unify to help them grow. In 2024, the trigger point happened when Unify got an offer out of nowhere when they're not even looking out for a Series A raise, and that was a huge amount, but it was time bound. Moving ahead, we'll talk about the partners and the primary interests of each side. So Unify was doing what they were doing. They wanted the maximum representation. They don't want to lose a lot of partners that they already have. The partner was strong for them because they have two credible bidders and they were bidding with each other to what they wanted was a maximum valuation. They didn't even wanted to raise money at that time because they had the runway, but they were not able to totally use that because it was a time-bound offer from the Silicon Valley-based fundraising. The information that we have from the position was they were very self-knowledgeable and they know where they are sitting and how fast and which pace they are growing. Let's talk about Emergence now. So they have a criteria of thesis-based funding, and they wanted to build relationship with their clients. So investors, sorry. So Unify, they have put in a lot of effort with. They were having a big partner here because they have everything to lose if they do not put in money now. Because they have built that relationship, nurtured over 14 months of time. But if they don't invest now, they're going to lose that lead and just sit in the backseat and see the company raising with other people. The next is the rival fund. The name was never revealed, so I'm not going to put it here. But they wanted to go and hop onto an AI startup that is growing 39 times a year. So they were strong because they put a really strong deal out there. And they were competitive enough to get into that space. So these are few figures that you can see how that happened. The seed round was 6.6 million, Series A, Emergence put it in, and they, Mohak is gonna talk about in next slides, what happened in the time frame of those after that 72 hours. So these are the few numbers that we wanted to show it to you.
So like, these are the heart of the story and it has four moves. The move one is that the rival strike. So this was the time when their rival company came and they sent a surprise offer like with tight deadlines. The goal was simple, like to stop anyone else from bidding. Use the founder's fear of making a mistake and turn the excitement around AI into a quick signature. The second move was like used make his move. So this is a turning point of the whole case. He does not argue with the rival over price. Instead, he picks up the phone and calls Saper with one phone call. So Saper is the guy for Unify who handles all the thing like from the funding and everything. So we just called him directly with one phone call and he turns one-on-one pressure play into a real contest between two bidders. And all these rivals like have their own deadline. So that call itself is the negotiation. The lesson is a backup plan only helps when you use it actually in time. So the move three was that Emergence has a tough choice. They have to move fast as the rival is moving, the with and like but without being reckless. The 14 months of work they have put into Unify is now it's the time that will pay out them because they already know the company. They don't need weeks of time to study it. The real question is about timing. Are we investing like too early? And the answer became the title of the case with like AI waiting for the usual milestone like is itself a risky bet. So the move four was the result. Emergence together with Thrive wins the round. They win on trust and on already being inside the company, not by offering the highest price. And now the part of assignment like that asked for is what should each side have done differently. So when it comes to Unify, what they did well was like instant call to Saper manufacture competition under the clock. What better they can do is pre-agrees a right of first conversation with insiders before any term sheet lands. And what could be done good is like 72-hour mini process with 2-3 pre-qualified funds to test. And what could Emergent and Saper can we do is like the 14-month relationship investment converted a reactive position into a win. So this was a thing that was did well by Emergence. And the thing that they could do better is that without waiting for such a long time, you are knowing a company for so much time, like 14 months is a lot of time in order to understand the company. So they could make a offer beforehand only, rather than the rival has came. And what rival did wrong in this case was pressure works on isolated founder. So the founder there was not isolated. And what better they can do is like they can co-lead with the insiders, converts an adversarial loss into partial ownership. And the final deal was signed in October 24. The existing investor win. Three numbers tells the story. 12 million Series A led by Emergence and Thrive with the OpenAI startup fund, Neo Abstract 20 sales and AltCap also joining. 19 million the combined figure they announced, adding in the early round and zero, that's what the rival got. So Emergence summed it up in one line. It was like after backing Unify in their founding round in early 2023, we are excited to double down and lead their Series A. And the real world status today is where do things stand in the mid 26. In July 25, Unify raised a $40 million Series B led by Battery Ventures at an estimate $260 million value. Again, that value comes from outside reporters, not the company. Battery's partner, Dharmesh Thakkar joined the board. Also, and the like earlier investors, OpenAI, Emergence, Thrive, and others, all joined in again. And in January 26, Stanford published the teaching case. So this negotiation is literally part of the course now. And the key takeaways are that time pressure beat process, but information and trust beat time pressure. The second is the best move under an exploding offer is really accept or reject. It's the phone call that recreates competition. The third one is you can't time the breakthrough, so pre-position yourself on the right to read before the clock starts. Thank you.
All right, nice job. So the one thing that's really hard to simulate in a classroom negotiation session would be time, because time in the real world will often impact one party more than the other. And time pressure is sometimes, as you saw with BioPharm, for example, time was of the essence for BioPharm, right? Because they needed production capacity now.
Yeah.
And every minute was costing them money. So there's a cost of time. And that's where I think it's difficult. Even in BioPharm, was there a sense of time pressure as you're sitting there? Or were you just thinking about, oh, we got 45 minutes in the classroom, but in the real world, time is a big factor here. So I liked your first takeaway that says information and trust beat time. So how do you, I guess, explain that further, right?
This is a simple thing. I mean, like if I get an offer from a company, they ask me to sign the offer letter within like 1 week. But if I am waiting for some other company to offer me some other position,
Yeah.
and I know that this could happen. So there is like, I'm not sure that I'll getting the offer from the other company, but I'm definitely sure about this offer.
Right.
And it's time bomb.
So what if you ask for, again, like the previous example, ask for the extension, say, could you give me some more time? Right.
You can ask for the extension, but again, like it's depend on the company whether they are ready to expand.
Right.
Yeah. So at that point of time, it's your trust and believe in yourself and the information that you collected towards the company. If you feel that is right, then there is no pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the problems I've had this year admitting students is that we gave them deadlines for making decisions about coming to Northwestern or not. And to improve our numbers, we kept extending the deadlines. But like you just said, if you extend the deadline, then there's no time pressure. And now there's no reason for them to make a decision because they can say, well, there'll be another extension. Why should I make a decision now, right?
Exactly the same thing happened when I was getting admitted here. So I was really confused about getting into Northwestern because the overall global solution was not allowing at that point of time.
Right.
But there was a time of pressure that getting into such a prestigious university is a once in a lifetime moment and you should not ruin.
Right. Even if the economy is not so good.
Yeah.
Even if it means that you might have to wait a few extra months to get a job, right? Yeah, and I guess that's part of the dilemma that everybody's facing these days, right? So, and for me to buy time for the candidates doesn't necessarily make their job any easier.
So,
Does it matter if in March or in May? It's the situation hasn't changed that much, right?
Yeah. And again, like to cover my point one, that time beats like pressure beat process. So I kind of get the thought that I am getting onto the deadline and I surely have to make a decision. But again, I collected all the information from my peers who are
Right.
studying in the Northwestern
Right.
and like who are working after graduating. And again, like it's such a highly reputed university, so you have that trust overall.
Right. But the people who accept early, they want to come no matter what.
Yeah.
The people who accept the deferral or accept the extension generally don't come because their level of concern isn't going to be abated by 30 or 60 days, right? What I liked about this case, though, is that we rarely talk about negotiations in the context of a startup. And in fact, I've yet to do a startup VC type case study in negotiations. We probably should. Maybe I should start writing them instead of waiting for others. But there's a lot of negotiation in terms of valuation, like what's the value of the company? And that will determine what the percent ownership is versus the contribution from the investors. So often there's a big tug of war. And that's why, when I teach negotiations to undergrads, we have 3 ways of calculating valuation, simply because every one of them is valid. Every one of them will probably give you a different number. And, frankly, these are used as weapons in the negotiation process to figure out, okay, the founders want a higher valuation, and the investors want a lower valuation, right? Especially, pre-money. So I think that would be a whole, like, couple week session right there, is to figure out how do you package negotiations for startups, and what are the things you can negotiate? It's not just money, but it's involvement, it's governance. There's a whole lot of dimensions to the negotiation when you're talking about VC. So anyways, thank you. Nice job. Next up is Faro Energy. While you guys are setting up, let me do a quick, survey here. This assignment, what do you think this is valuable to have this kind of wrap up to bridge to the real world and what's been happening? Or is this a distraction? Is it good?
Because we familiar with the real cases and what we are studying in the classes almost like originally.
A little bit of a fiction. I mean, some of them, they might be based on reality, but all the names have been changed. All the numbers are different. So the real world with, stuff like Apple and Google and Meta and, medical companies, I think these connect you to different industries and different real world scenarios. I tried to pick stuff relatively topical the last 5-6 years.
We're getting much more exposure about the real cases.
Right.
And there are some things that you didn't even heard of. So you are just getting some more news as well.
Every new class that comes into MEM, I say the first thing is read the Wall Street Journal every day. You get it for free at Northwestern. All you need is less than an hour of your time, and you'll become much more business savvy. These are all case studies that were in the Wall Street Journal. Had you been reading it, you would have known about them anyways, right? With that, let's turn it over to Faro if you guys are ready. I guess not. Okay. But I think it also highlights, since a lot of these were legal cases as well, this kind of interplay between the legal world and the pure negotiations world, right? Lawyers tend to negotiate from a power base, meaning the threat is, if we don't settle this here, we're going to settle this in court. If we don't settle this here, a judge is going to decide, right? And oh, by the way, deeper pockets prevail. I can hire 6 assistant lawyers. You can hardly afford one. Who do you think is going to win, right? So that's why the cases and the courts are really things that you are trying to avoid through situations like this course, right? Mediation, arbitration, bargaining, right? These are the alternatives to taking something to a court of law. Looks like you're ready to go,
Yeah.
correct? Take it away.
So today, I will discuss Faro Energy with you guys and the negotiation challenges involved in commercialization in relation to geothermal system. So the case is interesting because it is not a simple negotiation between two parties. Instead, it is like a stakeholders negotiation between investors, utilities, regulators, and technology developers and corporate customers. So the central challenge in this negotiation is like risk, investment, infrastructure, and long-term energy commitment, and bring a new clean energy technology to the market. So what is Faro Energy? So it has been founded in 2017 in Houston with the goal of making geothermal energy more scalable and commercial competitive as well. What makes Faro unique? It applies the technology used in oil and gas companies or industry, and especially horizontal drilling and hydraulic simulation. And it has like a main advantage from the other green technologies such as like wind turbine and solar, is that like it's independent from the weather conditions. That's why it is like preferable to have geothermal energy production. The company objectives is to provide like reliable 24/7 carbon-free electricity, and if we move on like to the key stakeholders, which play an important role in Fervo's commercial process. As you may know that Fervo provide like the engineering system as well like the expertise in installing such system. However, later on, like we will find out that Google and NV Energy has been like investing in this company, and it helps validate the technology and demonstrate like market confidence as well. Later on, we found out that California Edison or Southern California Edison invest in Fervo to produce like 320 megawatt of geothermal power, while Shell Energy like provides some kind of expanded support, additional support for expanding the project. So each stakeholders in here have different priorities, including cost, reliability, regularity, approval, as well as clean energy goals and investment risk. So as a timeline for this startup company, I will repeat myself a little bit in here. So Fervo has been founded in 2017 in Houston, but the major breakthrough came in 2023 when the project became like operational. And this project actually has been proven to be technically and commercially viable. And this success reduced uncertainty and gave Fervo stronger credibility with utilities, investor, and corporate customers. And following the project RED, many like companies, energy companies such as Edison, signed major power purchase investment and additional partnership with Shell Energy. And the key negotiation where like my colleague are going like to discuss it in here is purely related in engineering, commercial, and as well as technical validation, and can became like a strongest form of leverage.
So I'll cover the co-negotiation challenges that Fervo faced in this particular scenario. There's the obvious engineering risk because again, this particular technology involved horizontal drilling, like the Jack said. You know, what's the thermal sustainability, you know, how it is going to impact the reservoirs, you know, how many times you have to drill, and then obviously how much can you scale this particular technology. And along with the engineering risk comes the financial risk where what are the drilling costs, because obviously this is a new technology, and to make it for this to be commercially viable, you have to scale it a lot. So there are going to be high drilling costs, and there's going to be a lot of financing dependency. You would have to give a lot of debt, and there's a regulatory risk as well, where you need to get all the environmental permissions, groundwater. You have to protect the groundwater, and there are like seismic concerns as well, because again you'll be drilling below the ground, so it could lead to some unforeseen consequences. And the commercial risk is, you know, long-term pricing, utility contract, and you know, how do you integrate it along with the rest of the grid. The financial stakes are like Fervo had already signed a contract for 658 megawatts across major utilities, and their flagship project, Cave Station, the expected capacity was 500 plus megawatts, and but the demand, because we all know how fast AI is scaling and how much talk is there about data centers and AI. So AI is driving a lot of this electricity demand, as well as there's a mandate from, I think, the government that all the corporates and all the big companies, they need to have 24/7 clean energy targets. So that is also driving a lot of this demand. And like I said, there is a lot of decarbonization mandates imposed by the governments on these companies. And these kind of projects require deep drilling, fiber optic monitoring, and transmission integration to be actually viable. Talking about the negotiation, you know, the leverage, for Fervo's leverage was they had innovative technology and they had AI-driven technical expertise. And all the other stakeholders would benefit if the commercialization succeeded. This makes it a primarily an integrative negotiation. Fervo held superior technical knowledge, creating leverage, but also this also brought credibility challenges with investors and other companies who were not familiar with EGS. But the Fervo's background here is that they could seek alternate utility paths and it would delay obviously commercialization, but they could also raise additional private capital. The reputational and environmental impact are for this particular project is positive impacts are reduced carbon emission, reliable renewable baseload power, smaller land footprint than large solar grids, and it also supports decarbonization. The risk where hydraulic fracturing perception for drilling induced seismic concerns and water management challenges along with high infrastructure.
Thanks, Nilip. How outcomes could have been improved. So looking back, both things could have been made the process really smoother. Earlier pilot programs would have built trust and unlocked the financing faster. Shared risks agreements, the government participations would have spread the financial burden. Faster regulatory coordination would have reduced the investor hesitation, and a strong public communication would have cleared up the confusion between geothermal simulation and oil and gas fracking. These aren't just the hindsights, they are the playbook items for the next wave of EGS projects. And regarding the engineering management and negotiation lessons, three lessons that stand out. First one is the technical validation, is the leverage. Project-led unlocked every major commercial deal that followed. No pitch deck could have done that. Then the second is the regulation and financing are the same problem. Permitting delays are the financing delays. And then the third, the multi-stakeholder coordination isn't a soft skill. It's a core engineering management discipline. And Fervo was simultaneously managing credibility with the investor, utilities, regulators, and the communities. The negotiation was never just about the specs here. And in conclusion, Fervo's success came down to both pillars: technical credibility, strategic communication, stakeholder alignment, and the long-term risk sharing. They had to move engineering, feasibility, financing, regulation, and public trust forward at the same time. That's the real lesson for the engineering managers. I would say commercializing complex infrastructure is not linear. You operate on all the fronts simultaneously, and that's what the Fervo did, and that's why it worked.
Thank you. Nice job. I was going to go in a different direction from your conclusion. You talked about how your multi-stakeholder negotiations are going on simultaneously. While that is true, there's also time is linear in this sense that, you're going to be negotiating with regulators and with investors and with customers at different points in time. I mean, you're going to be talking about the risk of the technology being overlaid with the negotiations such that this dynamic process is quite complex, right? A test might prove negative, or you might find that there's an environmental impact that you didn't anticipate. So the risks, the technology, and the negotiations are all happening both simultaneously and over time, right? With multiple stakeholders. So this is a model of project management that I've never broached, I guess, in class, because it doesn't really fit the textbook very well. But project manager is negotiator or is the hub of a negotiating team that's working in different directions and over a period of time in multiple dimensions, right? So that technology can affect regulation, regulation can affect performance, performance can affect the financials, and it becomes this huge mess. Right? It's like a hairball. It's just kind of a mess. And it's our job sitting in the middle of that hairball to make sense of it and to negotiate it and to manage it in a way that's beneficial to the project, right? Does that seem fair? Okay. Last thoughts?
Well, what you are saying, like, I really like it because it happens in my company now. So at SNC, we used to use a gas called SF6, where it is not recoverable anymore. There is new regulation for this gas. We went through different gas called green gas, but a mixture between CO2 and some SF6, but in low percentage. At the beginning, the State Department accepted, but recently they said like, no, we don't need it anymore. So we are like now doing some kind of research for different gas, pure related, like non-polluted. And this is a big conflict between our clients, Department of States, and the engineering department, where it's like we have this notice in.
And you're halfway through.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And it says course correction, pivot, whatever word you want to use. This was not in your original plan,
100%. We have this problem now. We need to deal with it.
right?
And what about the production line that we start with? So.
And then the finance people are going to say, why are you over budget? And your bosses are going to say, why are you behind schedule? Right? And you're going to say, well, look at the story. You can't, look at this project without understanding its history, right? Okay. Thank you. Nice job. Okay, next up is Google versus China. And if you're getting the sense that project managers in particular, as well as product managers, need to be comfortable with ambiguity, complexity, and change, then you're right. I mean, that's exactly the case. If you're not comfortable with those things, you can stay an engineer, but you're still going to be stuck with most of these complexities anyways. You're just going to be subject to somebody else's interpretation, right? Yeah. Take it away.
Okay, so hi everybody, we are going to cover the case. So starting from what Google believed in, Google believed that information should be free, and China believed that information should be controlled. Everything that happened between them stems from these two beliefs. Today, Debanjana and I will examine how this conflict between Google and mainland China's beliefs basically became one of the most famous international negotiation failures in business history. Okay, cool. So first we'll look at the context, then we'll go into an analysis and then the key takeaways from this specific case. We'll cover the background and the timeline, the dilemma around censorship based on the differing beliefs between the two parties, the cyber attack that followed called Operation Aurora that effectively ended the relationship between the two parties, some of the negotiation frameworks that can explain why, and then basically see what we can learn from this case. Okay, so a quick timeline for context. China had 137 million internet users by 2006. This was the second largest internet market in the world, closely behind the US. And that number was expected to grow over 1 billion in coming years. So there was a huge opportunity here for Google to enter into this market. Google's Chinese language service had already been accessible through google.com by 2000, but it was slow, it was frequently disrupted by the Chinese government, and it was losing ground to Baidu, which is known as the Google of China perception. So Google made the decision to launch Google.cn, which is a locally hosted, faster product that was built specifically for the Chinese market. But the price of entry was compliance with what is known as the Great Firewall. Basically, any search engine that is operating in China has to filter results on politically sensitive topics. So this was not a gray area at all. Any any product, any business that was operating in China had to abide by those rules. And it was a condition for the operating license. And it was enforced by the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, China. Google agreed and then launched Google.cn with censorship in January of 2006. But by 2008, there were tensions when the Beijing Olympics happened. Censorship disputes intensified between the two parties. Google was caught between Chinese regulators demanding tighter controls and then Western governments demanding transparency. Then in December of 2009, there was a cyber attack against Google, which was Operation Aurora, which we will get to in a moment. But the timeline basically shows that this wasn't just a sudden break or a sudden issue with the two parties, but it was a slow erosion from the beginning.
Okay, so now let's look at the heart of the ethical conflict. What each side actually wanted, what were their beliefs, and why those ones were incompatible. So Google ideally would say, don't be evil. It was just not a slogan that was there on the papers. It was the statement around which the branding of Google was built. Google made a brand promise to the employees, to the regulators, and even to the users. Google had committed publicly to provide free flow of information without any bias, without at most transparency. It had built its global reputation on being a neutral open platform. Entering China with censorship meant actively hiding results about Tiananmen Square. It meant that if a Chinese user searched for Falun Gong, they would get nothing. So Google knew this and it agreed anyway with one concession. It would show user a notice that the result has been hidden. Transparency about censorship itself, even if it couldn't show the main content.
China, however, countered that this was a matter of sovereign authority. Beijing's position was consistent and it was legally grounded. So every platform operating in China, including Baidu, which was the Google of China, and every domestic company was abiding and operating by the same rules. And Google was not being asked to do anything unusual. You either comply or you lose your license. So the dilemma was that Google staying in the Chinese market meant complicity, and then leaving entirely meant conceding or ceding a market entirely to Baidu, which had no ethical hesitation about filtering whatever the government of China asked for. So either way, Chinese citizens were going to lose access to uncensored information. So the question was whether Google would be the one to filter it or whether it would simply not be there at all.
December 2009, Google detects a sophisticated state-sponsored cyber attack. A lot of major companies had to face this, almost 20 plus companies, but the large amount of attack was on Google. The attackers specifically breached Gmail accounts of Chinese human rights activists and steal Google's intellectual property. Fast forward to January 12, 2010, Google goes public, unprecedented. No major tech company had done this before. So Google directly comes up with a blog where it directly accused a foreign government. The blog post announced Google would stop censoring Google.cn and was considering a full exit. 0 perpetrators were ever charged, and that was just not an oversight, it was Beijing's message. So the numbers here, although look impressive, they're often misread. $600 million in China revenue sounds large. Until you know, Google's total revenue for the same year was around $29 billion. So China was just under 3%. The real cost wasn't 2010 revenue, it was optionality. Google exited just before Chinese mobile internet explosion was created. WeChat, Alibaba, and Didi was just built during this time. So $8 trillion ecosystem Google had no part to play in. Today, in 2026, China reports 1.4 billion internet users, DeepSeek reshaping the global AI, Baidu at 80% search share. This is the true cost of exit that Google had.
And some of the frameworks and terms we've discussed in class can help us to understand or explain everything about, this conflict between the two parties. So when we look at BATNA, Google's BATNA, was to redirect to google.com.hk and exit the mainland China market. So Hong Kong definitely has, less restrictions on, some certain things like these, like government censorship. So, they would maintain their brand integrity, but they will forfeit the revenue that they could get from the mainland China market. China's best alternative was Baidu, which was already very dominant in the area and already preferred by the government and by the people to some extent. So Google's exit posed minimal disruption for mainland China. And I guess when your counterparts, BATNA, is their preferred state, they probably have zero incentive to concede. So when we look at the ZOPA was already very thin because the two parties disagreed greatly on what censorship should be. So Google needed partial censorship with disclosure, but China demanded full censorship and zero transparency. So essentially there was no overlap, but it really collapsed after the Aurora cyber attack incident. Culturally as well, Google negotiated publicly and transactionally, but China operates through like back channels and mostly relationships. So they were speaking different languages from the beginning and the entire time. So what Google should have done or could have done, first of all, they could have built a Western tech coalition. So we're thinking they could have negotiated as a coalition. So Microsoft, Yahoo, and Google together, so that if they've had to ban all major Western platforms, it would be far more costly than just expelling one, which would be Google in this case. Second, they could have demanded written cybersecurity terms before any license renewals, so that something like Aurora was foreseeable and could have been avoided from the beginning. Third was invest in relational diplomacy. So guanxi is something in Chinese business culture. That basically means relationship first diplomacy. So the Chinese people believe that trust precedes transactions in any kind of business context. And that's something that Google could have, considered in the beginning. And then finally, propose stage compliance with milestones and not a binary accept or leave condition. So that framing was probably a trap for Google in the beginning.
All right, so where are we in as per the current stats? It's a stat we considered from 2024 to 2026. The first is decoupling. The Google exit wasn't just one company walking away, it was a trailer of the broader US-China tech war. Today, you have the CHIPS Act restricting the export, Hawaii ban from US network, TikTok facing legislation issues in US. The pattern Google started is now government policy on both sides. Second is the DeepSeek big headline that was released by China in 2025. China released a DeepSeek R1 versioning AI model that matched Western frontier models at a fraction of cost without access to top NVIDIA chips. This proved China does not need Google, does not need Western tech, and build a world-class ecosystem entirely on its own. That's the ultimate consequence of Google's absence here. Two internets were formed. The world has split: a US-led open internet and a China-controlled sovereign internet. Google's 2010 exit accelerated that split. It's now permanent and hardening. So the next slide focuses on lessons that we can kind of take from this case. The first is reservation point. Google never defined when it would walk away before entering. So the exit in 2010 was pretty reactive rather than proactive and was chaotic. Always it's important to set your walkaway point and condition before you sit down. Values as leverage. Don't be evil was Google's one of the most important value and was actually Google's strongest asset from a brand perspective. They let it erode instead of building it very strategically. Cultural intelligence. China negotiates through relationships and back channels. Google pushes more on publicly and transactionally. So there's a complete mismatch here. Process matters as much as the deal itself. written terms, the entire operating relationship with China had no enforceable written obligations, no cybersecurity clause, no arbitration, nothing. Vague agreement becomes a point of crisis. Coalition leverage, like Amma said, Google negotiated alone against a sovereign government. Microsoft plus Yahoo plus Google together would have been a completely different negotiation. Alone, China could afford to let them go.
Great, so I guess Google's China decision had no clean answer. Staying meant complicity, leaving meant irrelevance, especially in such a large market. So we believe that the failure wasn't the 2010 exit, but it was entering into 2006 in the first place without any walkaway conditions, without a coalition, and without any written protections. So then when the crisis did come in 2009, they had no options and could only react to the issues. So this taught us that preparation is what creates some of these options. And the question isn't whether Google made the right call, but whether you will have prepared well enough to even have a choice in the first place.
All right, nice job. I guess I'm motivated to think that, you know, Baidu was already in place when Google entered, right? Why did they wait so long to enter? Google search has been around since well before Baidu. They chose to enter after Baidu, which gives them a disadvantage because the government's going to want to protect the local, right? The indigenous companies. You're right, they should have had a coalition, but they could have done the coalition 5 years earlier instead of when they did. So timing is everything. Coalitions are quite a bit of this puzzle as well. And also negotiate first before you roll out. I mean, why would they create the parameters after they've stubbed their toe? It makes no sense to make that investment only to pull back. And when they realize, wait a minute, our values in the US seem to contradict the Chinese values, right? No kidding. Did it really take rocket science and all these billions to figure it out? Here's the irony, right? As a YouTube, user, there's a lot of censorship on YouTube today, a Google product within the US. How do you reconcile that with this case, which is all about censorship in China that Google found intolerable because it doesn't match the censorship here? That would have been an interesting angle, or I guess distraction, if you will, from the regular case study. But it's just like, what's changed that in 2026, we see YouTube being censored? By who? Under what authority? Is it government or non-governmental entities? And under what guidelines and framework? I mean, I can tell you now that the content producers on YouTube are extremely frustrated because they don't know what the rules are. They can be demonetized and they can also be deprioritized at a moment's notice with no explanation, no rationale, no guidelines to point to. So back to, how can you operate like this if you're trying to run a business as an influencer? How do you operate that way, right? And that's here. That's right here in this country, right? Right on this machine. Seems like I don't know, a little bit of a contradiction, right? Yeah. Thoughts? Did my comments make sense to anybody else? Are you seeing the same thing? Right? I mean, there's YouTube content that's being removed from YouTube, in some cases voluntarily, because they don't want to put up with the restrictions and the unwritten rules that YouTube's already put in place. And YouTube is a Google property. This is a Google product, right? All right. Thank you very much. Nice job. All right. Next up is Meta, Google, Amazon. If nothing else, this exercise is giving you a sense of the pervasiveness of negotiations, the pervasiveness of how it integrates with technology, and certain technology issues that are at the forefront now that I suspect most of you were not aware of. Is that fair? This is the world you're entering into, outside of academia, into the real world of messiness, ugliness, contradictions, right? And messiness. Before you start, I just want to ask, who's graduating at the end of this quarter? For whom is this? Let's give these guys a round of applause. Congratulations. So this might very well be your last session. Is it? It's your last session for sure, right? Yeah, yours? Okay, there you go.
Just a few exams next week.
Few exams, nothing. All right, take it away.
So today we're gonna see how engineering can become a weapon when it comes to negotiation. So we've noticed that engineering decisions don't just shape products, but they also shape power and markets. Our focus in this antitrust negotiations around Google, Amazon, and Meta in the US and the EU, and how the technical architectures become a central bargaining chip with regulators. We'll argue that technical design is never neutral. In these cases, APIs, data silos, and UI flows become levers that change fines, reputations, and even whether core businesses survived. Let's start with Google, and then we'll move on to Amazon, and then we'll contrast those results with that of Meta to draw out cross-case negotiation lessons. So moving on to Google. Over more than a decade, Google faced escalating antitrust scrutiny over its search advertising stack, and especially in Europe and US. So these investigations culminated in findings that its ad tech and search businesses were operating in illegal monopolies, putting Google on the defensive in multiple jurisdictions. By the time the key verdicts came down, the narrative was no longer about innovation. It was about dominance, self-preservance, and whether Google's integrated technical stack unfairly logged out rivals. So Google's strategy shifted dramatically over time across these antitrust negotiations. Early on, Google could have negotiated from a position of strength, creating targeted behavioral remedies for legal certainty, but instead it litigated hard and then lost on liability, which meant that once the courts branded its core ad search as an illegal operation, its leverage collapsed. At that point, Google's strategy narrowed. It was no longer about avoiding liability, rather it was about limiting the damages. It was trying to preserve Chrome, Android, and key parts of the ad stack while giving regulators just enough to close the cases. So, what did the approach produce? I'm not going to run through the entire thing because it's a lot of content, but let's just summarize it for you. Financially, Google absorbed about 2.95 billion euros in ad tech fine and an additional $391.5 million in settlement on location tracking in US. The earlier picture that you saw of Sundar Pichai was one of that, him sitting in front of the panel. I'm sure many of you must have seen that in videos. Reputationally, Google now carried an official illegal monopoly title to its name. And in hindsight, the key lesson that I believe Google could have done differently was be proactive in its behavioral commitments that were offered earlier in the investigation. That would proactive behavior commitments early in the DOJ and EU investigations could have preserved reputation, kept a credible background, which it lost during the course of the negotiation, and potentially avoid the financial predicaments. Let's move on to Amazon. Amazon faced a very different configuration of risk, antitrust exposure in both Europe and the United States. It's centered on marketplace practices, data use, and especially the design of prime enrollment and cancellation flows, which regulators called it as dark patterns. The stakes were massive. In Europe, regulators threatened fines up to 10% of the global revenue of Amazon. While in the US, the FTC pursued Amazon over deceptive prime enrollment and retention tactics. What's striking with Amazon that it took on two very different approaches in Europe and United States. Europe was a more integrative approach, whereas United States had a more diversified approach. In Europe, Amazon used facing the 10% global revenue threat in Europe, it put behavioral remedies on the table as it is. Buy box parity, a second competitive buy box slot, and a strict retail seller data silos. Those technical and operational concessions preserve the core marketplace model. In this case, both parties had a wide SOPA and they reached a win-win deal. Whereas in the United States, Amazon took a very distributive approach, litigating heavy stance. With the FTC, it fought the prime dark patterns case aggressively instead of offering equivalent behavioral changes upfront. That hardened the conflict. The agency pushed towards structural remedies and the SOPA declined. So, again, financially, this was a huge penalty towards Amazon, especially in the US. It came up to 1 billion in civil penalties, 1.5 billion in consumer redress fund, etc., etc. Reputationally, the US case was very damaging because they exposed deceptive prime enrollment of around 35 million users. That's all of us. And it ultimately lost about $1.75 billion deal with iRobot acquisition, which prevented Amazon from integrating home mapping into its system. So, in hindsight, the EU playbook proved to be more effective, where they approach the system in an integrated manner, where they look for a win-win situation. If they had copy-pasted a similar strategy over here in the US, where they looked for a more better solution rather than going at it with them on the table, this would not have hardened the FTC. Rather, they would have come to the table saying, okay, let's look for a best solution that we can come up with. Now, Nick will take over with Meta and see how Meta's solutions were very different as compared to Google and Amazon.
Yeah, so Meta was a bit different than the other two companies. In 2012, they acquired Instagram for 1 billion, and in 2014, they acquired WhatsApp for 19 billion. Essentially, Meta now owns Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. The FTC in 2020 sues Meta. They were saying that they were either buying or burying their competition, and essentially the acquisition of Instagram and WhatsApp made them a monopoly over the private social network. However, in 2015, the result was that Meta won the trial victory. The court ruled that they were not a monopoly in that area, and I will explain why in the next slide. But as of 2026, the FTC decided to do an appeal, so this case is going to be opened up again. So what was Meta's strategy? The FTC demanded $30 billion from the company and for them to sell out Instagram and WhatsApp. They were telling them that they had too much control over social media networks. However, Meta's team was very smart in this negotiation, and they saw that the FTC didn't have a strong case against them. They used their system architecture and competitors to prove that this was not true. So what they did initially was they offered a settlement at $430 million, which is 450, sorry, which is so much lower than the 30 billion that the government initially wanted. There was a misstep by Zuckerberg in this negotiation. They already noticed that their FTC strategy was flawed, yet Zuckerberg went an extra step and did a bit of lobbying. He donated $1 million to Trump He went to Mar-a-Lago and tried to negotiate with him. This set a bad precedent, and this alongside the 450 million offer infuriated the FTC, calling the offer delusional. And this essentially eliminated any SOPA that existed in this case, and they then went to trial. Eventually, the court ruled that the FTC failed to prove that it was a monopoly. So what was the outcome? They avoided the entire 30 billion penalty, and they didn't have to sell off the two companies that they bought. However, their reputation was impacted by this, as they were labeled by the FTC as delusional. However, the verdict did frame Meta as a legitimate competitor in this, and not a monopoly in this network. As far as Instagram and WhatsApp goes, so many people use it around the world. So in the human side, people weren't impacted. The data infrastructure of Meta was preserved, and there was no forced separation. In hindsight, we argue that the best thing that Meta could have done was not be branded as going against the FTC entirely. They could have not exactly made a deal, but going behind their back and trying to deal with Trump and all this wasn't. I don't see that as completely ethical. They were in the gray zone, as I would call it, and it wasn't necessary since they already had a strong case. This would have gone to court without any of this happening. Same conclusion.
But they're not alone in going to Trump or going to Washington, right?
yeah.
There's so many technology companies that have thought they could cozy up to Trump and get what they want. In some cases, it's kind of worked, right?
Especially at the start of this administration, you had,
Yeah.
we saw it with Elon Musk being so close, and now.
Yeah, at the beginning of 25, I mean, there was a parade. There was
Yeah.
a parade of technologists going there. So Meta wasn't, I mean, can you really blame them?
I don't think so.
Blame them, but the repercussions in terms of how much reputational damage they got, especially when they already had a strong legal case, it wasn't required.
Yeah.
They already had a legal case. They could have quietly built on it, preserved their reputation. Going to a higher administrative body while bypassing judges is never looked greatly upon from the justice system. It's just they remember things.
It kind of goes to the question of how independent are these commissions like the FTC, given the current administration? I think Meta assumed that it was corruptible. And maybe a lot of companies have.
Resulted in this is FTC was so offended by that now they have appealed. And they're gonna get it, and they're gonna spend so much money again on legal battle. If they could have avoided that altogether, win it at one go, come up with a better solution, they might have not be facing same issue all over again.
And it does go to show that, you know, still relationships and having, you know, basically fairness on both sides still makes a big difference. It makes a role in how people act. It's not just strictly what does the law say, because there's a lot of subjectivity in terms of what the FTC does and how they prosecute things. And like you said, if they get infuriated by your actions, they can accelerate their work against you. So
Then it's gonna be a never-ending battle.
yeah, so don't ever negate the power of the personality and the power of the personal relationships, because that's always a part of it, regardless of what the law says or what the regulations say, right? Nice job. Thank you. You got one more slide?
A little bit.
One more? Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so essentially, most of us are engineers, and this is a negotiation class, so let's connect the two. Most of
Okay.
the strategies that these companies took were revolved around engineers. The engineers knew all the technicalities of the system architecture, and they used these levers to defend their stance. For example, in Meta that we were just talking about, they argued that opening up WhatsApp to any API would be a security risk because they have end-to-end encryption. They also argued that as we saw, there were some blackouts in WhatsApp and Instagram, and most of the people started using TikTok and YouTube Shorts, for example. disproved to the court that they didn't have a monopoly and there were other apps out there that people used. Same thing happened with Amazon, since they knew the data architecture and they wanted to reduce the damage that the court was gonna do. They essentially offered in Europe to do the data silos and trade certain data secrets essentially. And with Google, the same thing. They offered up APIs and they figured out a feasible way with their system to negotiate a deal, to get a deal done without having to sell Chrome and Android. We already explained the financial results and the reputational, but this is just connecting engineering to the actual negotiations here. But yeah, from class lessons, it's always good to know your BATNA and know your counterpart's BATNA. Meta knew that they didn't have a strong case, so they ended up winning. Trust is always a leverage and never burn it. Don't burn bridges. As we saw, Meta did burn the bridge with the FTC, whereas on the other hand, Amazon worked with the European Union to find a deal that benefited both. And early integrative moves always win more value. Again, Amazon wanted to work with Europe because they didn't want to pay 10% of their global revenue, which would have been a massive number. Yeah. Yep. But that's our presentation. Thank you.
Nice job. So do you think Amazon was distributive in the US out of sense of arrogance, confidence?
I think it was more confidence than arrogance because they were integrative in Europe. Which
Right.
is a completely
It's kind of I guess the arrogance might come from the fact that there's such a market dominant player here, not so much there.
possible. I do not know enough about that market to be able to comment on that. But I do believe they were confident enough to take that approach over here. Possibly because they were a very big player here.
Wants to take out Amazon, so.
But this just goes to show that nobody is safe from legal battles.
Right.
It just goes to show that you have to be ethical even while you're negotiating. Nobody appreciates bypassing FTC or DOJ or whatever you're bypassing. In all, what we took away most from this research that we were doing is ethicality was at the gist of it.
Yep.
And it's very important to say that way.
Even when you might feel like the administration itself is unethical,
Yeah.
it's not an open door to be unethical yourself.
Yeah.
Right? So don't assume that just because the senior boss is breaking the rules that you can too, right?
Yep.
All right.
And yeah, the strategies differ too because
The different engineering.
companies believe that the US government and the FTC is a lot more logical, whereas Europe has a stronger stance and they will do what they say they will do without any
Right.
leeway. One of the countries that was harsher was Germany against
Yeah.
Amazon.
Sure.
So they didn't want to face them and they just ended up integrating an integrated solution.
Okay.
Yep.
Sounds good. Thank you. Next up is Southern Cal Permanente Medical, and that will be the last one. I apologize, we're running late. Southern Cal? So one takeaway clearly is negotiations and technology interact in far more ways than you thought possible, and in far more places that you didn't even know was an issue. So Kaiser, take it away.
Everyone, today we'll be discussing the Kaiser Permanente case and how it turned into one of the biggest labor management partnerships in the history.
Didn't start that way. You can keep it in this mode.
As mentioned, this is the Kaiser Permanente management versus labor dispute. Okay, and this is kind of what we're gonna cover. Let's give it the time. So the two main sides in this case are the Kaiser Permanente management and the labor unions. The management was made up of the two main divisions of the company, and it was led by the CEO and the lead negotiator. On the other hand, labor was represented by a coalition of 26 different unions that represented over 70,000 employees. One thing that made this case unique, as you may have already noticed, is that both of the sides were made up of coalitions. So they had to spend a lot of time managing disagreements within their own groups and getting all of their interests aligned. This complicated the negotiations even further. Additionally, conversations between the two parties were mediated by a group of facilitators that were outsourced. So they weren't coming from the company and didn't have their own biases. So to understand the dispute, we'll get into how the relationship evolved. So Kaiser was founded in the 1930s with really strong labor involvement in unions. From its founding to the late 80s, the relationship between the labor and the management was positive. This was partly because of the cost model that Kaiser used that allowed them to pass on labor costs to the customer. So they got to keep wages competitive and their workers happy. All of this changed in the 80s and 90s when the for-profit HMOs appeared on the scene and made it a lot more competitive for Kaiser. These HMOs offered cheaper premiums for the customers, which meant that Kaiser had to introduce cost-cutting measures and layoffs to stay competitive. Workers began to feel that job security and patient care were being sacrificed, leading to brutal negotiations in 1994. At this point, trust between the two groups was at an all-time low, and both sides agreed to form a partnership in 1997, which eventually leads to the agreement that we'll discuss in 2000. This dispute was mainly about competing interests. The two sides had completely different priorities that didn't really fit together very well. Management was concerned about remaining competitive with the for-profit HMOs, so they implemented layoffs, expanded into non-union regions, and cut costs. However, workers felt that they were losing job security and that the quality of patient care was declining. At this point, the unions faced a strategic decision. One option was a power play. They could launch a corporate campaign to get public pressure on Kaiser and force them to change their policies. But they knew that this carried significant risk because then they risked destroying the company completely and losing their jobs and not gaining much. So at the end of the day, they chose to enter into a partnership with the corporation. The dispute had significant financial consequences. Kaiser and its unions spent nearly a decade in this dispute trying to work out favorable terms for both sides, which led to probably a loss of productivity and likely even a loss of customers. The partnership itself cost about $12 million in its first year and included wage increases of roughly 4 to 6% annually. However, both parties argued that the real financial cost was the instability that was being brought on by the conflict, and they saw the partnership as a worthwhile investment. The dispute also had very important non-financial impacts. This is especially true because Kaiser works in the healthcare space, so any turbulence within the company can eventually have effects on human lives and just general public well-being. So employees experienced burnouts, job insecurity, and declining morale during this time. And because this occurred, the staff was concerned that this whole dispute was compromising both patient care and safety. At the same time, repeated labor disputes were tarnishing Kaiser's reputation. A tarnished reputation is incredibly impactful here because it would make customers less likely to trust Kaiser with something as important as their lives. To address the dispute, the two parties held a series of talks in 2000. They made an intentional effort to use interest-based negotiation instead of the positional bargaining that had failed for them in the decades leading up to this. The process involved 7 bargaining task groups that addressed one issue each. The main issues were wages, benefits, staffing, safety, workforce development, and work optimization. These groups then fed information to the Common Issues Committee. Then, when a national agreement was agreed upon, it was taken to the 26 local tables that ironed out how the agreement would be implemented in every region that Kaiser covered. And eventually, this resulted in a contract that received 92% approval. One main reason that this process succeeded was that both parties had a realistic BATNA, and that looked like just going back to the drawing board and going back to the positional negotiations that occurred at a local level. However, both of them knew that going back to that system wasn't ideal and that the partnership was probably the benefits. This case highlighted the strengths and limitations of the interest-based approach. First, trust became one of the partnership's greatest. Years of collaboration created trust between the two parties that caused them to take each other's claims more seriously, avoiding impasses and moving towards collaboration. However, some issues were hard to solve collaboratively. Issues like wages were still distributive because no matter how you put it, that's the kind of thing where you have to divide the share of the pie. As negotiations entered the final stages, the process became more positional, involving marathon bargaining sessions. Finally, strong leadership was critical since leaders had to keep their coalition aligned. In hindsight, several improvements could have been made in this negotiation process. Participants should have been trained earlier, and more stakeholders like middle managers and physicians should have been involved. Additionally, the process should have relied less heavily on a small number of leaders, because as we'll see later, when those leaders leave the company, then that causes further turbulence. Additionally, issues like strike possibilities shouldn't have been left unresolved, and objective measures should have been applied to evaluate the partnership.
So now coming to the negotiated settlement in the year 2000. So this settlement was a 5-year national contract ratified at around 92%. It gave 4 to 6% annual raises, employment security to retaining rather than layoffs, union security, phased performance sharing, and a joint training fund, all in briefly 38 pages. Estimated impact of the settlement bought 5 years of labor peace after a decade of strikes, plus unions promoting it as the HMO of choice. Workers gained economic and employment security and a real voice. The cost was about $12 million and for the first year, and then $6 million a year share. So what happened next from between 2000 and 2023 is that the partnership became the largest and longest running one in the US, in US history. Union members nearly tripled. Kaiser grew from 8 to almost 14 million members, and there was no national strike for 26 years. But in 2018, several unions split off to form the alliance, leaving two federations to coordinate. The crackers, union, civil war, and the courts. The labor side also went to war with itself. In 2009, the SEIU put its biggest local into trusteeship, and the ousted leaders formed a rival union. The NUHW the next day. SEIU sued for 25 million. In 2010, a federal jury awarded about 1.5 million, upheld on appeal in 2013. Managing the coalition had become the central problem. The two-tier near strike in 2021. Kaiser proposed a two-tier wage system, big pay cuts for future hires. About 40,000 workers readied a strike, and Kaiser backed down days before the deadline. The sticking point, Kaiser had netted $6.4 billion in 2020, while arguing the cuts were for the customer. The largest healthcare strike in US history. Then in 2023, 75,000 workers walked out, the largest healthcare strike in the US history, and the first national strike in the partnership 26 years. The trigger was understaffing as a patient safety crisis. It settled in a week with the acting labor secretary at the table and was ratified at 98.5%. Today's settlement and where it stands. The 2023 contract runs through 2027 with 21% raises, a $25 California minimum, and a pledge to create 25,000 new workers. Kaiser today is huge, about 116 billion revenue and 13 million members. The partnership survives, but it's describing as limping along. Conclusion, a few lessons. Interest over position diffused a decade of mistrust. A weak back now on both sides kept them at the table. Trust lived in specific people and faded when they left. And the biggest one, a signed agreement in the start of implementation, not the end of conflict. Partnership didn't end disputes, it changed how they were fought.
All right, thank you. Nice job. So what did I get out of this? The value of coalitions, massive coalitions on both sides, which we talked about earlier today. Interest-based negotiations, the importance of that, which we talked about on day one, going all the way back to week one, day one, right? So, I mean, this kind of validates that, but at the same time, it shows that nothing's permanent, right? And frankly, negotiations is a process. It's ongoing. The issues change, and obviously staff utilization and understaffing became a bigger issue later than it was earlier, and that caused the strike, I assume, right? Those are issues in across healthcare generally, and you're seeing nurses leave the profession at a phenomenal rate, faster than they're graduating from school. So this is a problem, right? And part of it, much of it, I believe, is because of understaffing. So I thought it was a great case. I think it kind of wraps up a lot of the concepts from the quarter, all in one place. Any comments? Questions? Let's give this team a round of applause and all the teams a round of applause. All right, hopefully you got something out of the class. I apologize we ran late. I will finish up the grading in the next few days, so you'll be able to see how you did. If you have extra credit, please get that submitted. If you need additional extra credit exercises, if anyone needs them, I can release them. I've hesitated to do that because I don't want to overwhelm you guys, but feedback for me. What did you think of the class? Useful? Yep. Good? All right, hopefully we'll have more students next year. Tell your friends, right? Take the class. And we'll be offered, I believe, in the spring. In the fall, we're going to be offering project management, not winter, but fall. So, and this fall's project management will be combined with undergrad project. So we'll have, by definition, a bigger class. Okay. Otherwise, have a great summer. And for those graduating, congratulations. I will see many of you at graduation in just, a week and a half, something like that. So see you then. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
So how many guests we are allowed and we're not?
I'll talk to Renaissance. She's the one coordinating all that, but how many did you want to bring? I don't think that should be a problem. So yeah, just let her know and see if that's an issue. But I mean, you're not bringing in an army.
Anything is part of our side or.
Okay.
Yeah, but I thought I was ask you.
Okay, I don't have any